This is basic magic. Standing in the middle of a blackened crater, Shane furrowed his brows as he stared at the smoldering, windswept sands around him. A plume of smoke drifted lazily from a charred patch of ground nearby. His mind raced. That was basic magic, wasn't it? In theory, basic magic was supposed to be harmless, entry-level stuff taught to children in magic academies. It barely packed enough punch to light a candle, let alone leave behind scorched earth and miniature shockwaves. Yet here he stood, surrounded by devastation worthy of a mid-tier spell gone rogue. "I barely used any magic power," Shane muttered, genuinely confused. "I was even careful this time." Ever since the incident with the magical sword, Shane had been extra cautious not to overdo it. Today, he deliberately restricted his output to the minimum required to cast the spell properly. So why did it look like a miniature meteor strike had hit the outskirts of Lamidjan? I didn't level up any of my skills. Haven't even practiced meditation or chanting properly, he reasoned aloud. By all logic, this shouldn't have been possible. Unless... Shane narrowed his eyes at the glowing entry in his status window. Magic Guide. He sighed, picked up the book he'd set aside, Magic Basic Studies, and flipped rapidly through the pages. Sure enough, the book confirmed it. The power and effects of magic are determined by two primary factors: the user's magic skill level and the amount of magic power expended. The efficiency and casting speed are improved through mastery of support skills, such as meditation and chanting. So far, everything lined up. But then came the real kicker. There exist two additional factors that can further enhance magic: magical potions or tools that amplify power or effects; rare skills, such as unique, special, or magic amplification types, that drastically increase magical output. Magic Guide fell into that second category, and the book had more to say about it. Among all known magic amplification skills, Magic Guide stands as one of the most potent and practical. It not only enhances the effects of spells, but also amplifies the user's magic power itself. Unfortunately, this skill can only be acquired by members of the Divine Race or Demon Clan. Humans are fundamentally incapable of learning it. Even among those races, only the most gifted obtain it, and only after reaching level 80 or higher. Though some past heroes attempted to replicate the feat, none succeeded. There was a long pause. "Yeah, we're just going to pretend we didn't see that," Shane mumbled, snapping the book shut with the subtle panic of someone hiding incriminating evidence. The last thing he needed was more people telling him he wasn't human anymore. He already had enough jokes lobbed at him to fill a mass grave. Still, Shane couldn't shake the thought. Magic Guide really is that busted, huh? With a resigned sigh, he put the book away and turned back to the scorched remains of what used to be a perfectly harmless training area. Well, no sense holding back now. Focusing inward, Shane began leveling up his magic skills. All four elemental branches, fire, ice, thunder, and wind, were instantly maxed out. He even pushed his meditation and chanting to their peak. And then, casually raising a hand to the open air, he spoke one word: Tinder. The effect was anything but casual. Boom! A blazing inferno erupted in a stunning flash, rolling across the sand like an apocalyptic wave. Shockwaves tore through the surrounding earth. Wind screamed past Shane's ears, and the very ground seemed to tremble beneath the pressure. Where there had once been a clearing, only scorched, cracked earth remained, smoldering with residual heat. From a distance, it might have looked like a high-tier Demon Clan mage had unleashed a full-powered firestorm. The truth? It was Shane, still holding a book in one hand, his other arm extended, face flushed from the reflection of the flames, and wearing the expression of someone desperately trying to act like this was totally normal. Yep, just basic magic. He nodded to himself like he was trying to convince his own soul. Not wasting another second, Shane quickly bolted from the scene before anyone arrived to investigate the explosion. As he ran, he pondered aloud. There's still a ton of magic I haven't learned yet, and now that my skills are maxed out, it'd be a waste not to expand my arsenal. Intermediate fire and ice magic should be next. I'll ask Marika to teach me. And as for the other elements, Shane was already planning a quiet return to the Adventurers Guild's library. He wasn't expecting to find anything too powerful there. No advanced grimoires or forbidden incantations. Public libraries didn't stock anything beyond beginner-level magic. But then again, for someone like him, even basic magic is more than enough. In the days that followed, Shane practically lived in the Adventurers Guild's library. He buried himself in books, absorbing every scrap of knowledge he could get his hands on, especially anything related to magic. If he was going to maximize the advantages granted by his cheat skills, he needed to understand magic in all its forms. It didn't matter whether a spell was useful, obscure, or seemingly impractical. If it could be learned, Shane wanted it. You never know when even the weirdest spell might come in handy, he reasoned. With that mindset, Shane quickly worked through the available materials. He found beginner tomes on flame, ice, thunder, and wind magic, allowing him to expand his arsenal well beyond the 4 foundational spells he'd started with. However, despite combing through the entire library catalog, he found no traces of non-attribute magic systems, such as support, recovery, or holy spells, nor anything beyond basic tier magic. As he suspected from the start, the Guild's library wasn't designed to offer intermediate or advanced magic. It housed only basic attribute magic, good for newcomers in general use, but nothing deeper. No surprise there, Shane muttered, shutting another book and rubbing his eyes. It was only natural. Magic, after all, was not just a form of power. It was an advantage, a weapon, a closely guarded national secret. Originally developed by the divine race and demon clan, magic had become the cornerstone of civilization, warfare, and politics. Over time, each race had carved out its own unique systems, jealously protected to prevent misuse or exploitation. What if a rival faction learned to reproduce their magic? What if criminals abused advanced spells to destroy property or take lives? Unlike martial techniques, a single intermediate fire spell could raze entire buildings if used carelessly. In the wrong hands, even a low-level mage could cause a catastrophe. That was why the spread of advanced magic knowledge was tightly regulated by all governments. In most countries, magic was restricted by tier and type. The more dangerous or specialized it was, the more hoops one had to jump through to access it. For example, Shane had read that holy, support, and recovery magic could only be studied at temples, and only with explicit approval from their clergy. Even rarer disciplines, like space or gravity magic, were kept under strict lock and key, accessible only by recommendation from high-ranking nobles or royalty. As for intermediate and advanced attribute spells, they could only be learned through guild-sanctioned channels, requiring formal applications and sponsorship. So for now, it's just the basics, Shane thought, sighing. Unless I can convince America. Elves, after all, were born of magic. Their race was naturally attuned to it, and they had access to spell systems far beyond what humans could normally learn. Because of their gentle nature and the divine race's favor, elves weren't subjected to the same strict limitations. It was said they even inherited long-lost spells from ancient times, spells too sacred or powerful for public study. With that in mind, Shane made a mental note. I should really get closer to America, he mumbled, half-jokingly. Maybe talk about life and magic. Despite being locked out of deeper spell systems, Shane had still made valuable progress. His understanding of the world had grown significantly. What had once been a mystery was now common knowledge to him. He could now hold his own in conversation about the history, systems, and structure of magic. He even stumbled across records of legendary heroes, particularly the one from 1,000 years ago, renowned as the mightiest hero to ever live. The man who had defeated the Demon King, Mitra. Shane read everything he could find about him. It said the hero possessed a unique skill that allowed him to create multiple avatars, each as strong as the original, enabling him to fight an entire Demon Clan army alone. His holy sword could cleave through dragon scales, pierce magic barriers, have incoming damage, boost all skill levels by 5, and even raise his level by 50. It also had divine properties, purifying evil, dispelling curses, and annihilating darkness. So powerful was this sword that even the three great goddesses were in awe of it. Shane blinked, glanced down at his own holy sword, and reviewed its status. Level plus 100. All skill levels plus 10. 99% damage reduction. Immunity to all negative status effects. Max sharpness and durability. Deals bonus damage to evil-aligned entities. Possesses purification and banishment properties. He slowly closed the book, slid it back onto the shelf, and casually walked away as if none of that had happened. Moving on. That was how Shane spent his time, quietly growing stronger, learning, and exploring. Vivian and the rest of the squad had been busy during this period, so group missions were rare. Shane often visited the guild alone, quietly immersing himself in study and training. But over time, something changed. Every time Shane entered the guild now, the atmosphere would subtly shift. The way people looked at him, it wasn't hostile, but it wasn't the same either. Respect, curiosity, fear. It was hard to pin down, but it was clear people had noticed. And Shane? He was just getting started.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
On this day, Shane went to the Adventurers Guild, as usual. Upon entering the Adventurers Guild, Shane noticed that many adventurers immediately turned their gazes upon him, causing the surrounding noise to lessen considerably. Shane didn't pay much attention to this scene, as if it had become routine for him, and slowly walked into the hall. The adventurers around him began whispering among themselves as they watched Shane. That newcomer is here again. He's been coming to the guild alone a lot lately. I wonder if anyone will trouble him this time. I definitely don't want any part of that. Me neither. The crowd of adventurers conducted such private discussions, looking at Shane with a mix of wariness and, for some, outright fear. There was no helping it. Lately, because of previous incidents, quite a few adventurers had sought out Shane to cause trouble, including the tall adventurer who Shane had kicked away, who the very next day brought along his entire team, joined by other adventurers who held grudges against Shane to block him at the entrance. As the saying goes, the more people involved, the more complicated things become. Adventurers, who are essentially risking their lives every day, are not supposed to be short-tempered. Although Shane had felt more than once that this kind of situation was rather cliché, the nature of being an adventurer meant it wasn't possible for everyone to be law-abiding citizens. But since Shane was well aware of these ploys, why would he follow their expected course of action? Therefore, to avoid trouble, Shane utilized some tactics that scared all the adventurers. For instance, in the mentioned event, it was as if Shane had anticipated the tall adventurer's threatening stance at the door the next day, preparing to teach Shane a lesson. Yet, he brought over the night order patrolling the street. Look at them. They're trying to gang up on me with malicious intent and even threaten me to reveal the whereabouts of the person sought by the spy from the Old Demon Clan faction who was wanted. I suspect they are spies sent by the Old Demon Clan faction. Honorable knights, please uphold justice for me. At that moment, Shane righteously shifted the blame onto them, stunning those adventurers who had blocked the door. And indeed, the blame Shane cast was impactful. Shane already had the reputation of having subdued Killian, a story that had spread among the Night Order. In addition to that, Shane seemed to have had interactions with the individuals sought after by the Old Demon Clan faction, so the Night Order had been keeping a close eye on him. This was also per the instructions from Riley and Vivian, both of whom had mentioned that Shane was currently the only person in Lycia who did not shun contact with them. They had suffered a significant setback at his hands, and it was likely that they would target him again, so they had asked the Night Order to be watchful of Shane's surroundings. Consequently, once Shane saw through this and took advantage of it, pinning the corpse rice plate incident on them, how could it not have bewildered everyone? Thus, on that day, including the tall adventurer, all who had blocked the door were taken away by the stern and serious knights for questioning, and if things went awry, they might even be slandered as spies from the Old Demon Clan faction. Those who witnessed this scene with their own eyes were naturally dumbfounded for quite some time. Afterward, whenever such adventurers came out to cause trouble, Shane turned his head without a word and dragged a night order onto the street, claiming through sobs that he had encountered such unfair treatment after being privately threatened and attempting to help the kingdom catch a wanted criminal. He said it was utterly unreasonable, and he was about to lose his faith in both the kingdom and the guild, that he would never again believe in this society or this world. He had the members of the Night Order itching with discomfort. In this manner, from then on, the Night Order simply stationed a patrol team around the guild, causing all the adventurers who knew the full story to be as if facing a great enemy, becoming obedient and looking at Shane with eyes filled with terror, as if they were seeing a devil. Especially those adventurers who were taken away by the Night Order. They each knelt before Shane upon their return, apologizing and begging for mercy, crying miserably. Later on, everyone learned that before being taken away by the Night Order, Shane had specifically instructed them to be cautious of individuals possibly being dispatched by the old Demon Clan faction to rescue Killian, suggesting those who targeted him might have been assigned tasks, leading those adventurers to be subjected to intensive scrutiny, particularly since Shane had dropped a comment before they were taken away. Who knows if the young hotheads in the Night Order, with no chance to encounter the opposite sex, might fancy the tender backsides of adventurers. This statement haunted those adventurers, making them too scared to even sleep at night and severely tormenting their spirits. Under such circumstances, how could they dare to trouble Shane again? Praying that Shane wouldn't trouble them was indeed their sincere wish. Knowing all this, how could a group of adventurers not look at Shane with eyes full of fear and horror? Now, within the Adventurer Guild, even such rumors were spreading. What? You don't like that rookie? Is your home short of tea or something? What? A mere rookie is getting too arrogant because he's close to Miss Vivian's team? You must want to be a spy for the old Demon Clan faction. What? You look down on someone who is only level 10 at 20 years old and has no skill? Well, I advise you to start taking care of your backside. This is advice from us seniors. Don't provoke him. Definitely don't provoke him. Otherwise, not only will your last words be taken, but you'll also be kicked away. Don't say we didn't warn you. As an adventurer, encountering demons is not scary. Wait until you meet a devil, then you'll know what a thrill is. The above were the current evaluations of Shane by everyone in the Lemigian Adventurer Guild. Shane had single-handedly skewed the entire atmosphere of the Adventurer Guild. Like this, Shane seemed utterly unconscious of the various reverent gazes from many adventurers as he prepared to go upstairs to the library. But before that, the guild counter clerk notified Shane. Mr. Shan, Miss Vivian and her team are in the second-floor private room. They asked us to let you know, to come over if you're here. Upon hearing this, Shane then paused his steps. Can we gather again? Shane smiled slightly, without hesitation, and went directly to the second-floor private room. There, indeed, the members of Vivian's team had regrouped. You sure have stirred up a lot of trouble during this time. In the private room, upon seeing Shane, Vivian spoke with great displeasure. Not just Vivian, but also TL, Lumuya, and Marika. All three looked at Shane with strange eyes, making him offer an embarrassed smile. Can't deny, lately, Shane really went overboard. If Vivian and the others still don't know about Shane's heroic tales by now, it would definitely be a lie. I never imagined, Vivian expressed, that an intern newbie adventurer who hadn't even passed the assessment could make such a big name for himself within the guild. She felt torn between admiration and resignation. And it's not just in the guild, even outside. I hear your name mentioned from time to time. TL also glanced towards Shane. I've been hearing it often too, Lu Muya added weakly. Rather, it'd be impossible not to be famous, dragging everyone in the guild and the Night Order around with you. Marika even burst out with a bitter laugh. The four girls looked at Shane with peculiar gazes, not knowing how to comment on these exploits. Clearly, none of them had expected that in just a few short days, Shane would stir up so much trouble. It was indeed lamentable, bearing those bizarre stares from everyone. Although Shane looked frustrated, he really wanted to protest loudly. No, rather, Shane actually did protest. What do you think this is? Whose favor do you think you're in? Shane retorted, If it weren't for you all, those idle folks in the guild wouldn't have picked on me." Upon hearing this, the group of girls was momentarily stunned, and their peculiar expressions somewhat turned into guilt. "Come to think of it, this matter indeed has a lot to do with us," TL admitted. I'm so sorry." Lumuya hastily bowed and apologized to Shane. Marika also wore an embarrassed expression, clearly aware. As for Vivian, she was even more straightforward. "Regarding this part, I owe you an apology." Vivian put away her displeasure, lowered her eyes, and said to Shane, "It was because of my thoughtlessness and reckless actions that I caused you such trouble." "I'm sorry." It appeared that Vivian was very aware of the reasons behind Shane being targeted. "Well, it's not really something that requires an apology." Now it was Shane who felt embarrassed. After all, Shane had to admit, at first he found these cliché plots bothersome, but later he too got caught up in the excitement, to the extent of being seen as a devil. Perhaps because he had seen too many such plots in his past life, Shane was really poisoned by them. Hence the impulse always surged within him to play out these plots until they fell apart. In such a situation, Shane cleared his throat and spoke to Vivian. "Since it's all in the past, let's not talk about it anymore." Shane expressed himself straightforwardly, without beating around the bush. However, the responder was not Vivian, but a familiar person who walked in from the outside. It's actually quite interesting. It's rare to see those normally rude and disrespectful guys stumble and become so timid. Personally, it's very entertaining, and from the guild standpoint, it's also a chance to discipline them, to ensure they behave in the future. Hence, both publicly and privately, this was a win-win situation. The one speaking these words and walking in was none other than the president of the Lamigian Adventurer Guild, Riley. "President, TL, Lumuya, and Marika immediately stood up. "You came over so quickly." Vivian also stood, not surprised by Riley's arrival, as if she had known that the guildmaster would come over here. As for Shane, seeing Riley appear actually made him unconsciously duck his head. His demeanor was almost like he felt guilty. In fact, Shane did have reason to feel guilty. After all, Shane had acted as he pleased in the guild in various ways, and facing Riley, the president, was bound to be somewhat embarrassing. Riley naturally noticed Shane's behavior, and it immediately amused her. "Now you realize you feel guilty?" Riley said, chuckling, "But you don't need to feel that guilty. Although things got a bit out of hand, it wasn't your fault. The culprits were those you mentioned, the ones who had nothing better to do, right?" Upon hearing this, Shane thought it over and found it made a lot of sense. If he wasn't at fault, why feel guilty? Could being too extravagant be a mistake? Of course not. At that thought, Shane suddenly felt justified and empowered, and his whole demeanor relaxed as he flashed a very bright smile. Seeing this, Riley, somewhat annoyed, hit him lightly. "Even if it's not your fault, don't go overboard. Otherwise, if the adventurers in the guild are driven away, then I'll really have to resign as president and go back to inherit the title." This remark almost made Shane roll his eyes on the spot. Listen to that. Does that even make sense? Ignoring Shane's silently protesting expression, Riley turned her head and looked at Vivian. "Are you ready?" Riley asked this. "Not yet. I was just about to explain it to everyone." Vivian shook her head as she responded. "Then let me do it," Riley said. "This matter is quite important. It's probably better that I explain it." "That works." Vivian nodded and replied, "Everyone in the team is already here. Let's go over to your place now." No need for that trouble." Riley also shook her head and said, "Just explain it right here." Vivian hesitated for a moment, but then did not object and nodded again. Watching Vivian and Riley conducting what seemed like an enigmatic conversation only understood by them, everyone else was a bit confused. "So, does the president have something important to tell us?" Marika was the first to not hold back, raising her hand and nervously asking. TL and Lumuya also turned to look at Riley, one full of inquiry, the other becoming as nervous as Marika. Shane, however, was not too surprised. He had guessed before the gathering that since they had gathered again, there must be something to be done. Sure enough, "Actually, I've come to issue a new mission." Riley stated her purpose bluntly. "New mission?" Everyone perked up, their attention now fully on Riley. Shane was the same, but in the very next second, these words came out of Riley's mouth. I've discussed Killian's matter with Mr. Bellin and decided that in 2 days, the Guild and the Night Order will jointly send people to escort Killian to the royal capital. Riley announced this startling news. This mission is very important. Not only will the Night Order send enough personnel, but our guild must also deploy a substantial number of adventurers for this mission, and your team is the obvious first choice. This was the matter Riley was preparing to explain. Escort Killian to the royal capital. The words of President Riley resulted in an air of surprise among the members of Vivian's adventurer team, especially Shane, who looked as if he'd been struck by an invisible cudgel, his eyes widening in astonishment. Seeing the reactions of the team, President Riley couldn't help but smile. I know, you're all waiting for someone from the royal capital to be dispatched to Lemidgen to take Killian away. In fact, I'd say many are awaiting this, she said, her gaze sweeping over the group. However, there's no telling when the people from the royal capital will arrive, and whether Lemidgen's current combat strength can keep an eye on a demon clan member of Killian's level is quite disturbing. Moreover, she continued with a serious expression, I think that the people from the old Demon Clan faction certainly won't sit back and watch someone as valuable as Killian being escorted to the royal capital and judged. So, there's a very high possibility they will strike at Lemidgen to rescue Killian. If things really go that way, Lemidgen could face a great threat. Knowing all too well that ignoring such a threat was not her style, the president, who preferred to be well-prepared and nip crises in the bud, had, after assessing the situation, proposed a suggestion to the administrator of Lemidgen, Burin Mura. That suggestion was to not wait for the people from the royal capital, but to secretly escort Killian to the royal capital from here. The old Demon Clan faction will assuredly try to rescue Killian upon learning of his situation before the people from the royal capital arrive in Lemidgen, President Riley said with conviction. Given that, we have no reason to wait here passively for the attack of the old Demon Clan faction. Transporting Killian to the royal capital as soon as possible, eliminating all such risks. That is what we should consider. This way, should the old Demon Clan faction strike at Lemidgen, they would only discover their target vanished, swallowing a bitter loss. Of course, in Riley's calculations, the old Demon Clan faction would not be permitted to attack Lemidgen. She had already prepared to spread the news that Killian was being escorted to the royal capital during the operation and before the faction could attack Lemidgen, which would make the old Demon Clan faction's attack futile. By then, even if Killian had not yet reached the royal capital, the old Demon Clan faction that had gathered would definitely not be able to locate and rescue him before he arrived. And with Killian no longer in Lemidgen as bait, the old Demon Clan faction wouldn't risk attacking the town, would they? They would have no choice but to retreat, presumably. In light of this, both our guild and the Night Order will send people to secretly escort Killian to the royal capital, President Riley said with a smile to everyone present. From the Night Order's side, Mr. Bellin is even prepared to take action personally. So naturally, the guild will also send an adventurer team of top level for this mission. Vivian's team was the one chosen. The reason President Riley was here was to convey this news. However, the team members were left exchanging puzzled glances. Escort, a major criminal of the old Demon Clan faction. Lu Muya was beginning to feel a bit scared. This kind of mission, we've never done anything like it, have we? Marika also seemed uneasy. Should we really say, as expected from President Riley? TL murmured softly, as if to lament Riley's way of doing things. Only Vivian added this line. The reason we're doing this also has another aspect, Vivian said in a low voice. Don't forget, besides Killian, there's another target in Lemidgen that the old Demon Clan faction will be watching, and compared to Killian, this target is more likely to provoke the faction into making a move. Who Vivian was referring to, almost everyone guessed immediately, especially Shane, whose corners of his mouth twitched. For some reason, Riley then set her gaze upon Shane. In the past, that person never stayed in a town for such a long time. To avoid being caught by the old Demon Clan faction, she was on the run for 10 years, nearly traversing the entire continent, Riley said with deep meaning. This time, she has stayed in Lemidgen without leaving. Even if you say she has no particular intention towards Lemidgen, she must have a purpose for doing so, don't you think, Shane? Shane was suddenly too scared to speak. Watching Shane like this, Riley's smile took on a teasing edge. Although I don't know what that person intends to do, for now, she's undoubtedly a hot potato for Lemidgen. We can't touch her, nor can we let her stay here indefinitely, lest the old Demon Clan faction sets their sights on Lemidgen. So, we might as well politely ask her to leave. Riley spread her hands and said. She stayed because Killian was subdued here. If I'm not mistaken, she most likely wants to take some action against the old Demon Clan faction, so we better expedite Killian's transfer out of here. This way, there's a high probability that she will leave with him, which is definitely a good thing for Lemidgen. In summary, to distance Lemidgen from danger, Riley took this strategic step. Firstly, to quickly transport the significant criminal away. Secondly, to divert the old Demon Clan faction's attention and frustrate their rescue plans. And thirdly, to rid the town of a problematic figure. Indeed, a triple win. Shane felt an internal curse storm brewing. This president was somewhat impressive. Not only could she consider all sides of the situation and see through others' actions to a great extent, but she also managed to judge the advantages and risks involved. She even somewhat deciphered Lisha's purpose, thus taking the initiative and effortlessly removing all threats from Lemidgen, greatly ensuring the town's safety, impressing Shane thoroughly. However, this complicated things for Shane and Lisha's plans. Once Killian was transferred away and the old Demon Clan faction shifted their target, taken by surprise and no longer daring to show themselves, Shane and Lisha's desire to farm some villain experience would fall through completely. This made Shane weakly voice his concern. Is this really okay? That woman is a fugitive too. Letting her slip away doesn't seem quite right, does it? Shane said with little confidence. Also, won't the old Demon Clan faction become enraged after being played and lash out directly at Lemidgen? Shane's argument was not without foundation. However, Riley laughed in response, her gaze upon Shane growing playfully mocking. This made Shane feel insecure once again. Had the president already guessed the plan between him and Lisha? Damn, that's somewhat terrifying. Actually, the fact that Riley could guess about Shane and Lisha's affairs wasn't all that unbelievable. After all, Shane was the only one who had had contact with Lisha, and since Lisha didn't reject him and only met with him, there must have been a reason. It could have been out of curiosity towards Shane, the so-called new adventurer who could subdue Killian. It might also have been that Lisha knew something secret about Shane and doubted his identity. But if that were the case, Lisha would only have reason to meet Shane, not to stay in Lemidgen all the time. It wouldn't make sense for such a notorious fugitive to ignore her own predicament for the sake of one person, dismiss the reality of being a fugitive, and stay here, waiting for trouble to find her, would it? Therefore, Lisha definitely had some purpose. If this purpose wasn't aimed at Lemidgen, as Shane claimed, then it was very likely targeted at the old Demon Clan faction. If one considered this possibility, plus the fact that Shane himself subtly revealed his outstanding nature and had met alone with Lisha, it wasn't impossible for Riley to guess that Lisha intended to join forces with Shane to trap the old Demon Clan faction. The reason Shane was startled wasn't that he was prone to overreacting, but that he thought someone high-ranking like Riley wouldn't so easily believe his one-sided story, thinking that Lisha really had no designs on Lemidgen. In Shane's view, even if he said that Lisha had no purpose in Lemidgen, Riley would definitely not believe it right away. That would mean Riley would have doubts about Lisha's purpose, get caught up in thought and probing, and wouldn't directly guess what he and Lisha were secretly planning to do. Who would have thought? Riley actually completely believed Shane's words and didn't consider the possibility of Lisha intending harm towards Lemidgen, and thus immediately locked onto the truth. Shane just hadn't expected Riley to trust his statement so much. However, unbeknownst to Shane, what Riley believed wasn't him, but Vivian. Riley didn't know about Shane's identity, only that it was a secret not to be revealed. And with the guarantee of Vivian, her absolutely trustworthy childhood friend, she decisively chose to stand on Shane's side and took his words at face value. As for Vivian, she actually didn't trust Shane's character that much either. Even though Vivian was innately kind and gentle, that didn't mean she would fully trust someone after such a short period of time. Vivian's guarantee for Shane and her swift choice to trust him were somewhat related to her guesses about Shane's identity. In Vivian's eyes, Shane's identity was bound to be trustworthy and couldn't possibly belong to a malevolent villain. Therefore, Vivian vouched for Shane, and Riley trusted such a Vivian, which ultimately led to the chain of relationships that caused Riley not to doubt Shane's words. That is the kind of relationship that would emerge in reality. Reality isn't like a novel, where everyone besides the protagonist seems to lower their intelligence. There will be many fools, but there are just as many clever people, and it's practically impossible for everything to revolve around one main character as it does in stories. Reality is where each person has their own thoughts, each person has their own stance, and everyone has their own standards and judgments. And each outcome that seems so ordinary at first glance is actually the result of the interweaving of many thoughts and actions. Although Shane had witnessed so many cliched plots in his previous life and could dismantle them with a disdainful attitude, such triteness naturally wouldn't have any deeply intertwined complex thoughts. So unless this world had abilities like mind reading or foresight from Valern, how could he possibly completely guess all the developments? Reality is full of surprises. Now, the unexpected had happened. It was not possible for everything to revolve around the protagonist, allowing him to effortlessly achieve his goals. The thoughts and judgments of others could have a significant impact on the current situation. Of course, Shane's mood at the moment could be summed up in a sentence. I knew I wasn't the protagonist. It was indeed a sorrowful thing. However, Shane was also unaware that Riley, though she had guessed something, didn't plan to disclose it. After all, she stood by Shane, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say, by Vivian's side. Therefore, to Shane's words, Riley responded as follows. While the person is a fugitive, the kingdom, afraid to provoke and unwilling to act rashly against them due to concerns over the unknown dangerous item, has always been cautious and careful. Unless there's absolute certainty, they can only watch for now to avoid angering the other party. Even if we let her escape, no one would have any objections. Riley explained this to Shane. As for the people from the old Demon Clan faction, they might indeed attack Lamidjan in anger, but they're not fools. Even Killian was subdued here, and although they might claim publicly that it was you, a promising new adventurer who managed to subdue him with a powerful magic tool in an almost sneak attack, they wouldn't want to take a meaningless, huge risk, would they? What if there was a magic tool capable of subduing even Killian in Lamidjan? People from the old Demon Clan faction would certainly be apprehensive. So, if Killian was still in Lamidjan, they might take the risk. But if Killian was no longer there, without any benefit in sight, they would definitely not choose to take the risk and face further losses. Well, if I had such a tool, I wouldn't mind if they attacked directly. On the contrary, I'd hope they would, so that we could eliminate those pests. Riley gave Shane a beautiful smile, charming and alluring. If Mr. Shane happens to have any more of those powerful magic tools, please let me know. I'd be willing to pay a high price for them. These words, in this manner, made Shane feel nearly unsettled. That wasn't mine. It was given to me by Senior TL for self-defense. Shane once again embarked on the career of blame-shifting, although his tone sounded hesitantly evasive. This caused all the young girls present to roll their eyes, especially TL, who felt that maybe her previous lie to help Shane had been a mistake. If even TL felt this way, not to mention Riley and Vivian. Remember, TL had only helped Shane fabricate a lie within their small team. Riley and Vivian, on the other hand, had directly lied in public to cover for Shane, claiming the so-called magic tool was given to him by them. Now, seeing Shane blame-shifting while increasingly acting frivolously in the guild, both were beginning to wonder if helping this guy so many times was right or wrong. Anyway, that's the situation. Riley sighed and spoke to everyone. This mission is a secret one, and apart from a few related parties, nobody should disclose it to prevent the operation from being exposed. Not only would we fail to achieve our goal, but it could also draw the attention of the old Demon Clan faction towards you and result in an attack on you instead. The guild will not assign this task to only you. In addition to your team, there will be 2 other high-level teams tasked with this mission. The time is in 2 days, so get yourselves well prepared. After that, Riley provided Vivian's team with more detailed explanations, such as where to gather and what routes and actions to take to avoid being seen, secretly escorting the target to the royal capital. In this respect, as the team leader, Vivian was responsible and listened attentively, taking notes of all the key points. TL, Lumia, and Marika were also focused, evidently placing great importance on this commission. It was essential to give it importance. The group was preparing to transport a level 77 Demon Clan criminal, who was one of the masterminds behind a significant assassination incident in the royal capital 10 years ago. The perpetrator had plotted against countless nobles and even members of the royal family, earning extreme enmity from high officials and dignitaries in the royal capital, who would have preferred to execute him personally. The importance of this escort mission couldn't be overstated. Furthermore, since the old Demon Clan faction was involved, no matter how one looked at it, this commission was destined to be extraordinary. The adventurers, tasked with the execution, naturally had to be extremely vigilant. Shane alone seemed to be listening carefully, but was already muttering to himself in his mind. What should I do now? From the current pace, it seemed impossible to deceive the old Demon Clan faction. Should I consult with the lady first? Shane thought so, but quickly dismissed the idea. Even though he collaborated with Lisha, this commission was too critical, and if he rashly revealed anything to Lisha, causing her to act selfishly for her own purposes, Shane wouldn't be able to face Vivian. In other words, Shane preferred to stand with Vivian rather than Lisha. After all, Shane didn't fully trust Lisha yet. Their relationship, euphemistically called collaboration, was merely a union of convenience for their respective goals, and to suggest there was any trust between them would be strange. Otherwise, why would Shane be able to act so tough in front of Lisha? It was because Shane was still on guard against her. On the other hand, not only Vivian, but also Riley and TL had shown Shane considerable care and had helped him with many things that didn't need to be spoken to be understood. Thus, Shane could never betray their trust. Shane was genuinely grateful to Vivian and the others. Therefore, he felt it was better not to let Lisha know about this matter. It doesn't matter anyway if I don't deal with the old Demon Clan faction. Initially, Shane wanted to sabotage the old Demon Clan faction, simply to avoid being targeted for vengeance in some distasteful plot twist. If that proved impossible, Shane wouldn't persist. Besides, I am a man with cheats. If something were to occur, wouldn't I still have some solution? With this thought, Shane decisively gave up, demonstrating his unusual ability to accept situations as they were. Having come to terms with this, Shane's mind cleared, and he no longer concerned himself with other trivial matters, listening attentively alongside Vivian's team to Riley's explanations. Riley continued speaking for a full hour before letting everyone disperse. Afterward, they all discussed the matter amongst themselves for a while before dispersing. With the task scheduled in 2 days, everyone needed to go back and prepare as best they could. I need to figure out how to take care of my family first. Lumia expressed her unease, clearly worried about how to arrange for her 7 younger sisters during her absence from Lamidjan. I'll also consult with the elders of the elf clan about useful magic and methods of creating magic tools. Marika also appeared eager to prepare as much as possible. I am ready to depart at any time. TL remained calm and composed, as if to tell everyone that she was always prepared to give her all in battle. As for Vivian, after hesitating for a bit, she asked Shane a question. We're one thing, but do you really intend to participate in this assignment? Vivian seemed to be considering something. There was no helping it. Logically, you're still a newcomer under assessment, and there's no reason for you to accompany us on such a significant task, Vivian said seriously to Shane. If you want to stay in Lamidjan, then just say so. It seemed that Vivian had no intention of treating Shane differently because of his uniqueness. Shane knew that Vivian did not want him to think that they were using his power. Others might not be aware, but Vivian and TL must know somewhat about Shane's hidden strength. Hence, they did not want to decide on his participation in this mission without his consent, right? Although having Shane, with his tremendous hidden power, would make the task much more reassuring, Vivian clearly did not want to ignore his wishes for that reason. To this, Shane had only one response. Am I not a member of this team? Shane's resolute words somewhat shocked Vivian and the others. At least, Vivian seemed a bit moved. Since you put it that way, Vivian apologized to Shane with a smile. Shane also smiled and told Vivian not to worry about it, while he silently lamented. If I stay here, once that lady learns that I hid this matter and made her wait in vain, she'll probably come after me right away, won't she? Shane wasn't afraid of her, but rather than being bothered, he preferred to see that lady frantic and exasperated when she couldn't find him to settle accounts. Just thinking about it, Shane felt a thrill. So, they all agreed to meet again in 2 days and then dispersed. Shane also left the guild directly and returned to the inn. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. Soon, the time to undertake the secret mission arrived. Following Vivian's instructions, Shane prepared some clothes and toiletries, packed them in a bundle, and took them with the holy sword, wrapped in a long-shaped package, before leaving the inn. However, Shane did not head to the guild, but instead went directly to the center of Lemidgen. There was a gigantic building specifically used for office purposes. Like the Adventurers Guild, the building was situated on a vast plaza, but the plaza was surrounded by a wall and patrolled and trained by the Night Order, resembling a military stronghold, filled with a solemn and strict atmosphere. Shane arrived here, and here, at this time, in a corner of the square, about a dozen people were scattered about. Among these individuals, some belonged to the Night Order, and others were adventurers. While both groups wore standard-issue armor and carried standard-issue swords, each had their own assortment of mismatched equipment, which made it easy to distinguish between them. They had gathered around several horse-drawn carriages. In the middle was one with a carriage that resembled a cage, equipped with iron bars, clearly intended for the transport of prisoners. When Shane arrived, all the members of Vivian's team were already present. Aside from Vivian, who was conversing with the leader of another adventurer team and some members of the Night Order, TL was leaning against a carriage with her arms crossed, looking indifferent. Lumuya and Marika were also nearby, quietly speaking with TL and appearing rather restrained. This was likely because the adventurers and knights in the square couldn't help but steal glances in their direction from time to time. Even the patrolling knights and soldiers sometimes sneakily looked their way, which probably made them feel uneasy, right? After all, this is a place full of old guys who sweat under the sun all day long, training and working, suddenly throwing a few sweet and delicious young girls into the mix. If the vibe gets even slightly improper, it could turn into hentai plot in minutes. Shane couldn't help but comment before moving forward to join in. Of course, Shane wasn't joining the so-called old men. He joined the assembled adventurer teams and the Night Order, instantly drawing considerable attention. Have you arrived? Vivian, who was in conversation, noticed Shane and smiled at him. Not only Vivian, but TL, Lumuya, and Marika all reacted to Shane's arrival. Although one was only raising her head to look at Shane and the other two hesitated, unsure whether to approach, this indicated to others that Shane received a different treatment compared to the rest. Sorry, am I late? Shane approached Vivian, scratching his head as he apologized. No, you're quite early. For now, only our team and another adventurer team have arrived. There's still one team that hasn't shown up to report, and the Night Order is still making preparations. Vivian explained to Shane in a gentle manner, her friendly and approachable attitude once again offering a soothing effect to the old men around, who cast admiring glances her way. As expected, the sight of Shane being spoken to with such a tender smile from Vivian elicited a refreshing but chilly hostility from the onlookers. If it had been in the past, Shane would have had a complaint or two about the situation, but he had experienced enough of it to no longer bother reacting. In such circumstances, Vivian stepped aside a bit, revealing the figure of the adventurer she had been talking with to Shane. "Let me introduce you," said Vivian to Shane. "This is Alice, the leader of the other adventurer team that will be joining us on the escort mission today." The man Vivian was referring to, like her, was decked in heavy full-body armor and had a sword at his waist, though he carried no shield and appeared to be a middle-aged man around 40 years old. "You're the newcomer that's been the talk of the guild lately, right?" Alice greeted Shane with a clear and refreshing smile, much like a sunny uncle. "I didn't expect you to come along. I thought, given Vivian's protective instincts, she wouldn't bring you on such an important and slightly dangerous assignment." Alice wasn't the only one who thought this. Surely others must have thought the same, right? At a certain distance, it seemed that members of Alice's team were taken aback upon seeing Shane. Soon after, they began whispering to one another, clearly discussing the matter. Shane, however, didn't feel anything about this. "I asked to come here on my own," Shane said humbly. "After all, it's a rare and important mission. Even if I'm lucky enough to pass the evaluation and become an official adventurer, with my level, who knows when I'll see a commission of this scale again. So, seeing as this opportunity is hard to come by, I might have taken slight advantage of Captain Vivian's kindness for her to bring me along to see the world and broaden my horizon." This was the excuse Shane had thought up in advance. The reason is simple. For a high-level commission like this, it's easy to see that someone with too low a level would not only be of no help, but might even drag the team down. While Shane certainly didn't want to play the role of a dark horse pretending to be weak, he also wasn't going to go around boasting about his abilities. If he did, it would surely evoke some doubts from others. Considering that, Shane felt it was best to take the responsibility onto himself to begin with. Otherwise, it might have been all right for himself, but if others started doubting Vivian, that would be troubling. One could imagine what it would be like if Vivian, as the leader of a team about to undertake an important mission, was seen bringing a novice to wander around in such a situation. Shane could brainstorm several scenarios just off the top of his head, such as someone looking down on Vivian or being unhappy with her actions, thinking she lacked the qualities of a good leader. When the time came, Shane was confident he would kick those naysayers out straight away, without resorting to the cliché ploy of pretending to be weak to give them a slap in the face later. So, regardless, he'd better pin the blame on himself first. He thought, having grown accustomed to blame shifting, he even managed to shift the blame onto himself. Could this be the ultimate level of the art? While Shane's mind wandered in this manner, Alice burst into hearty laughter. "I see. You're here to gain some experience." Alice clapped Shane on the back, speaking as if they were old friends. "Indeed, it's a good opportunity. But I don't believe that the devil everyone talks about is just here to see the world. And not to mention, the Vivian I know wouldn't bring a newbie on such a risky mission for that reason. Kid, you wouldn't happen to be hiding some impressive tricks, would you?" Hearing this, Shane gave Alice a sidelong glance. Indeed, deserving of being the leader of a high-level adventurer team, he seems quite easygoing at first glance, but he's actually quite astute. That's what Shane thought. "All right, Alice, don't pick on Shane." Vivian waved away the hand Alice had placed on Shane's shoulder, saying irritably, "Although Shane is a newcomer, he has a bright future." Even Riley didn't object to his participation in this commission. "As a senior, you should help him within your means, instead of being so informal all the time." It seemed that Vivian and Alice had a good personal relationship, speaking to each other with little of the usual politeness. "You're quite strict," Alice laughed it off, saying, "Well, since he's a promising junior, I will definitely do what I can. Let's wait and see how you develop." "Thank you." Shane offered his thanks for the time being. However, at that moment, an untimely voice cut in. Level 10 at the age of 20 and hasn't mastered any skills. Is such a novice really considered to have a bright future? The sudden shrill sound made everyone present furrow their brows, especially Shane, who raised his eyebrows when he heard the sound and turned to look towards its source. The others did the same, and all looked over, causing TL, Lu Muya, and Marika to shift their attention as well. But on looking, the expressions of many changed. Vivian's smile disappeared from her face. Alice furrowed his eyebrows tighter and tighter. TL's expression grew cold, and Marika's breath hitched, a hint of fear emerging in her eyes, making her involuntarily hug Lumuya beside her. But Lumuya's expression was not much better either, trembling and looking as though she had seen someone she wanted to stay away from, almost on the brink of running away. Under such circumstances, three figures approached one after another. They were three very distinctive adventurers. Leading them was a handsome man, looking like a star, his face filled with friendliness and kindness. Being around 20 years old, he was the type who would cause fans to scream unintentionally if seen on the street. Beside this handsome man, there was another man and a woman. The man looked slightly younger, yet dressed in luxurious and lavish advanced equipment, even strutting confidently. The woman looked older, also quite attractive, but not with the pure and gentle type like Vivian and others, nor the intelligent beauty like President Riley, but more of a glamorously enticing vibe. These three adventurers made a completely different impression. One was hugely likable and dashing, another seemed like a flashy parvenu, and the last one drew the attention of the men around, obviously a huge temptation to males. However, seeing these three individuals, the expressions on Vivian and others were not very pleasant. "Leon, what are you doing here?" Alice looked at the handsome leader with surprise. But before the man could reply, the flashy one spoke first. "We're here to carry out this secret mission, of course," he said with a mix of sneer and pride. "This mission is so important. It naturally requires an exceptional adventurer team. How could our team not be chosen?" This statement was an absolute self-boasting to the extreme. At least, Shane didn't need to recognize to know that such a typical side character mode. That mocking statement certainly came from this guy's mouth. Even so, he showcased his arrogant demeanor unequivocally. Not waiting for Alice's response, he turned to Vivian, approaching her with visible excitement. "Captain Vivian, it's been so long." A sentence full of excitement was abruptly interrupted. "I'm no longer your captain, Mr. Mager." Vivian interrupted him while lowering her head, then added, "However, it's indeed been a long time. Sorry for not keeping in touch." Her words sounded so polite and courteous, yet the underlying message of keeping him at a distance was unmistakably clear. The man known as Mager naturally could tell, feeling a bit embarrassed and a bit at a loss, but still he spoke impatiently. "So, since Miss Vivian is here, is Marika here too? Is Marika also here?" Saying that, Mager looked around and soon noticed Marika, who was hugging Lumuya, her complexion somewhat pale. "Marika!" Mager's expression instantly became more enthusiastic, and he subconsciously tried to move forward. But in that moment, a dark wind howled and blocked Mager, stopping him in his tracks. Mager was terribly startled and couldn't help but back up several steps before he was able to make out the other's appearance, surprise and anger rapidly replacing the excitement on his face. TL. The person was indeed TL. TL looked at Mager coldly, a sharp blade somehow in her hand. "Step forward, and you'll break your leg again." Her icy, merciless words caused both shock and anger in Mager, but above all, fear dominated his eyes. TL. Lumuya quickly ran to TL's side. Marika wanted to follow, but upon seeing Mager, her expression turned very sour, as if some psychological trauma had been awakened, and she simply couldn't move. Vivian stepped forward, embracing Marika and softly comforting her, which relaxed Marika significantly. In such a situation, the others also gathered around. "What are you doing, Mr. Mager?" Alice asked somewhat impolitely. "Can you not scare people, please?" "This has nothing to do with you, Alice." Mager, finding a way out, retorted angrily toward Alice. "Watch your tone." This self-righteous remark displeased many. Indeed, I was out of line. Although Alice admitted this, his tone didn't become any more polite, instead addressing the handsome man beside him. "So, as the team captain of the young master, shouldn't you be keeping your team in check, Leon?" Upon hearing this, the man Alice addressed, as Leon smiled. His smile was very elegant and refreshing, like a breeze in spring, causing the women beside him to blush with infatuation. Then he spoke. Sorry, Mager has always been impulsive. I've scolded him several times already, but he is still young, so please be forgiving. While saying this, he spoke to Mager in a gentle voice. Mager, you should also control yourself. Even if you're happy to see Miss America, being too impulsive could shame the Fritter family, you know? Mager had nothing to say and seemed to take Leon's words seriously. Still, despite this, Mager continued to glance at America, his eyes showing unmistakable admiration, excitement, reluctance, and joy. Facing such a Mager, America not only felt no happiness, she bit her lip and buried her head in Vivian's embrace. Watching this scene, Shane, who had been silently observing, had many suspicions. The atmosphere, there seemed to be quite a few personal grudges here. Shane assessed the three unexpected guests. After Vivian had comforted Marika, she brought Marika over to TL and Lumuya before stepping forward. So you are the third adventurer team here on a secret mission? While saying this, Vivian's tone was tinged with a bit of anxiety and helplessness. Yes. Lon, not sure if he noticed her tone, looked straight at Vivian, his eyes as if seeing only her, and smilingly said, I knew President Riley would choose you, Vivian. I hope our cooperation will be a pleasant experience for both parties. Hearing Leon's words, Vivian showed no joy, instead falling silent, and even Alice beside her let out a bitter smile. Shane didn't expect this kind of reaction from Vivian and Alice. The nouveau riche was one thing, but this Leon didn't seem like such a bad guy, did he? The atmosphere in the entire square had become somewhat heavy at that moment. The surrounding knights and adventurers all looked this way, their faces full of surprise as they watched the heavy atmosphere among Vivian and her companions. Shane had also been thinking about the problem, and for a moment did not speak either. It was Leon who broke this oppressive silence. No matter what, we must carry out this secret mission together next, Leon said warmly as a member of the Lamigian Adventurers Guild. For the sake of Lamigian, this mission must be impeccably done. Please enlighten me. With those words, Leon extended a hand toward Vivian. Seeing this, everyone fell silent, including Vivian, who looked at the hand extended in front of her, her expression full of hesitation. After a while, Vivian sighed and prepared to shake hand with Leon. But at that moment, someone stepped in to stop it. It's not appropriate for men and women to behave this way. Let me do it for you, Captain Leon. The seductive woman, who had been gazing at Leon with an infatuated look from the beginning, suddenly stepped forward and grabbed Vivian's extended hand, her eyes full of hostility as she watched Vivian. Eudelis. Vivian murmured the other woman's name in a soft voice. It's me. We haven't seen each other for quite some time, Vivian. The seductive woman, named Eudelis, wore a smile, though her eyes held no laughter. And Leon, whose handshake was intercepted by Eudelis, subtly frowned and equally subtly immediately released his hand. Vivian, failing to notice this, started a conversation with Eudelis. I didn't expect you to be here. Vivian fixed her gaze on Eudelis's face. If the captain is here, naturally, I would be too, Eudelis said matter-of-factly. Is that so? Vivian seemed to sigh again, but she quickly displayed her characteristic gentle smile and said, It's still the same as before. Wherever Leon is, there you will be. That's a compliment to me, Eudelis replied with a smiling face. Initially, I didn't want to come, but I knew you would definitely be here. The implication was fairly clear. Eudelis was saying that she showed up because Vivian was here. So what? Vivian shifted her gaze to Leon and asked, Is your presence here because of President Riley's request? This was what Vivian wanted to clarify first, because Vivian knew that President Riley was acutely aware of the rift between her team and Leon's team. If Riley had assigned her this mission, it seemed unlikely that she would also assign Leon's team to come. Alice was also well aware of the issues between Vivian's team and Leon's team, which is why he was so surprised to see Leon's team here. Although there was no deep grudge between Vivian's team and Leon's team, A rift indeed existed. Had it been someone else, maybe it wouldn't matter, but Riley, being Vivian's childhood friend and lifelong confidant, would definitely not assign Leon's team, knowing this issue. Indeed, that was the case. Originally, President Riley had assigned another team. Leon did not hide anything and smiled. However, that team encountered a last-minute issue, so we came directly in their place. President Riley should be receiving the news soon, shouldn't she? A single sentence not only failed to ease the atmosphere, but instead made it increasingly perilous. So you mean you acted first and reported afterward? Alice asked with apathetic nonchalance. If I remember correctly, the details of this secret mission were not supposed to be disclosed, right? Which means the person who received this commission should not reveal the specifics to anyone else. So, from where did Leon and the others obtain such secret information and carry out this operation of acting first and reporting afterward? The answer was quickly revealed. Of course, it was the information I received. Mager, who had been staring at Marika, finally shifted his gaze and spoke with smug satisfaction. For others, this task is quite secretive, but my father is one of the decision-makers for this mission. Is it strange that I, as his son, am aware of it? Upon hearing this, Alice openly clicked his tongue. Not just Alice, Shane, who was quietly observing the situation from the sidelines, was speechless in his mind as well. This Mager character's background was not simple. His father appeared to be one of the decision-makers in Lemidgen, and thus knew the details of this secret mission. It was not surprising. However, the fact that one of the town's decision-makers so casually shared such critical information about the mission with his son, even allowing his son to freely disseminate it, really made one question whether there was something wrong with the individual's mind. Surely, President Riley must have been hopping mad about this in the guild by now. And these uninvited individuals seemed to think that, based on their status and position, they could just interfere with this mission. No wonder Alice openly clicked his tongue. And to think they said their team was so exceptional that it would be impossible for them to not be chosen. That was clearly contradictory. Shane somewhat understood why Leon's team was unpopular. Vivian took a deep breath and said, I think I need to wait for President Riley's decision before I can cooperate with you all. Clearly, Vivian intended to wait for Riley to come and stop Leon and the others. However, there is no need for that. When such a voice arose, everyone was momentarily taken aback, because the voice did not come from anyone present, but from a young man who looked young yet was fully armed and exuded authority, with a solemn expression on his face, surrounded by many knights. Seeing this young man, everyone immediately straightened up. Lord Bellin, including the ever-overbearing Mager. Everyone present saluted him and informed the bewildered Shane of his identity. The newcomer was none other than the son of the Lord of Marquis, Mula's domain, the captain of the Knight Order, and the highest decision-maker of this Lemidgen, Burin Mura. Leon's team's intervention was approved by me. Burin scanned everyone present and said calmly, I know there's some friction among you, but you are all talented individuals. I hope you will put the greater good first for this mission, and I believe President Riley will understand. Understood, Vivian said after a long silence, her expression neutral. Since Lord Bellin has said so, we will do our best. Yes, Leon also said respectfully. In the face of the bigger picture, we cannot afford personal conflicts. It's good you understand. Burin's stern face relaxed slightly as he said, we should not delay any longer. Start preparing to depart now. Everyone bowed and acknowledged. Shane, with no personal stakes, stood aside and witnessed everything, endlessly cynical in his thoughts. Though he did not know exactly what had transpired, he was certain of one thing. This journey was likely to be much more— Are you okay now, Marika? As everyone scattered to make preparations for departure, Vivian also gathered her team by the side of the carriage in a corner, gently asking Marika. I'm fine. Thank you, Sister Vivian. Marika shook her head and managed a smile for everyone, but it was clearly forced. I didn't expect things to turn out this way. Displeasure saturated TL's tone, making it obvious she had an absolute dislike for the arrival of Leon's team. I really want to go home. Lumuya even murmured such words half crying, reflecting the immense pressure she felt. Shane felt his curiosity was about to peak. What? Do you guys have a grudge against them? Shane was not particularly cultured and asked everyone directly out of curiosity. Their expressions turned somewhat indescribable. In the end, it was Vivian who answered for them. It's not exactly a grudge, she said, sighing repeatedly. But there is some tension between our team and theirs. That's true. I thought so, Shane shrugged. Not to mention anything else. That nouveau riche young master looks quite familiar with all of you. His eyes were practically glued to Marika. Ugh. Marika was left speechless and lowered her head, almost on the verge of tears. TL's tone grew colder as she said, "It seems he hasn't given up on Marika." It was glaringly obvious. Vivian patted Marika on the head as a sign of comfort, also directing her gaze to Shane, that Mr. Mager had spent about half a month in our team when he first became an adventurer and hadn't passed the assessment yet. With one sentence, Shane understood everything. He remembered that when TL, Lumuya, and Marika were overly wary of him, Vivian had once said something like this to him. In the past, our team also joined several male adventurers arranged by the Adventurers Guild, and some of them took advantage of camping at night. By now, there was no need to think twice. It was clear what Vivian's team had gone through after joining the male adventurers arranged by the guild. It was an experience that was certainly not pleasant for women. Mager had once been a newcomer in Vivian's team for about half a month, but the assessment for new adventurers was clearly 1 month. So why had he only been with Vivian's team for half a month? The reason was simple. That year, Mr. Mager was also highly regarded amongst the newcomers in the Lemigian Adventurer Guild, with great talent and potential. He was level 20 at the age of 15, and even Riley had a lot of expectations for him, so she arranged for him to be placed in my team for guidance. Vivian softly explained the reason behind it. Although that young master is impulsive and reckless, and too arrogant, often looking down on others, he originally had no worries about food and clothing and didn't need to become an adventurer. But with the ambition to improve himself, to strive and increase his own strength, he became an adventurer in the Lemigian Adventurer Guild. In other words, although this young master has some character issues, he has not been neglecting his duties. Instead, he is a hard worker who strives for improvement and is likely seen as a promising seedling by many. Perhaps Riley thought that by placing him in Vivian's team, she could correct Mager's character flaws and make him into someone of worth. However, once that young master joined our team and laid eyes on Marika, he hardly looked away. Not only did he court Marika incessantly during our adventures, but he also tried too hard to show off in front of her, often losing sight of our main objectives, and focused his actions around Marika. He even stalked Marika in private, sent her gifts, and eventually found the inn where she stayed, sneaking into her room multiple times. Vivian's explanation made Shane blink. Isn't that just like an obsessed fan? Shane was speechless. Under such circumstances, it was not hard to imagine what unforgivable actions the young master would eventually take. During a camping trip on one of our adventures, while the rest of us went out to gather firewood, he couldn't resist and took advantage of Marika. At this point, Vivian's tone became somewhat colder. If it hadn't been for TL patrolling around the campsite, noticing what was happening and stopping him in time, Marika would have definitely been harmed. Even Lumuya, the shy beastman girl, couldn't hold back a comment, obviously very upset by the incident. Marika's head hung even lower, visibly trembling as if remembering the incident. Seeing this, Shane finally frowned. Why would someone like that still be allowed to stay in the guild? Shane asked bluntly. With such indecent behavior, is Riley really letting him off just because he has talent? Shane's opinion of Riley would surely plummet greatly. But the one to answer this question wasn't Vivian, it was TL. That guy is no ordinary person. He's a noble. TL spoke coldly. His father is a vassal of Marquis Mula, who came to this town with Mr. Bellin when the latter was assigned to Lemigian, having status and position second only to Mr. Bellin. Meaning, it was only because his family pleaded on his behalf that Mager was allowed to continue in the Adventurers Guild. Even so, Mager was kicked out of Vivian's team, and was forbidden to approach America. I see, Shane mused. So, the young master joined the team of that person named Leon? That's right. Vivian nodded. Leon accepted the young master and passed him through the rookie evaluation. And what's the deal with this Leon? Shane asked curiously. Why does it seem like none of you have a good impression of him? Is he some kind of bad guy? Nobody answered immediately. Vivian hesitated, finally saying with a wry smile, it's not that he's a bad person, but honestly, to those who know of his deeds, Leon is very much looked down upon. Looked down upon? Shane raised an eyebrow. What was that about? As Shane was pondering this, Vivian offered the following. Because he is a man who climbed the ranks by relying on women. At that moment, Shane almost thought he heard wrong. What did he hear? Climb up using a woman? Shane was utterly baffled by the meaning of the statement. Seeing his reaction, not only Vivian but also TL, Lumia, and even Marika's expressions became somewhat peculiar. I know you're surprised, but it's true. Vivian still offered an explanation with a wry smile. Leon was not born into a noble family like Mr. Mager, not even a commoner, but a child born in the slums. According to Vivian, Leon's parents were thieves, with numerous arrests and imprisonments. Leon himself had no outstanding talents, and at the age of 25, his level was only 22, much lower than his peers. Leon had long determined that he would never be able to rise above his station through his own abilities. But paradoxically, Leon's ambitions were not small. He didn't just aspire to rise above others, but wanted to be one of the elites, even a noble. For this purpose, Leon leveraged the only advantage he'd had since birth, his face. It's just hearsay, but I've heard that since he was young, Leon's been pondering his image, not only using every possible method to maintain his appearance, but also diligently practicing etiquette and social skills, and then constantly finding ways to get in contact with women in Lamidjan who could be of help to him. By this point, even Vivian's tone seemed somewhat strange. At first, it was about mingling with older women, relying on their support to get by. Next, he sought out the affections of the richer merchants' sisters or daughters to gain some financial support from them. Then, Leon started to interact with some of the female adventurers and merchants' daughters, enchanting them in various ways, winning their selfless devotion and getting their assistance. Under such circumstances, Leon was able to reach his current status. It said that the reason he passed the adventurer's entry test was that the captain of the team, assessing him, was a female adventurer who was quite fond of him. The equipment he wears was mostly provided by the women who were smitten with him. His choice to become an adventurer was not to level up or train, but to earn as much money as possible and, by taking advantage of the adventure channels, to establish connections with high-status women. Because of this, even many of the clients seemed to have fallen for him, providing him with various kinds of support, and sometimes even issuing commissions specifically for Leon through the guild with assignments so trivial they couldn't get any smaller, yet the rewards were frighteningly high. Thus, Leon finally established his own adventurer team and began finding every conceivable way to recruit and approach people who could be of help to him. Mr. Mager's reason for joining his team is probably due to Leon's initiative, but it seems that Leon's real goal isn't Mr. Mager, but to use his relationship with Mr. Mager to get in touch with Mr. Mager's sister. Vivian's explanation caused Shane's mouth to twitch uncontrollably. Not just Shane, even Lou Muya and Marika, who had already heard some of Leon's exploits, wore an indescribable look. If it were described in terms from his past life, it would be seen at all. But it wasn't over yet. Did you see that woman with him, named Eudelis? TL chimed in nonchalantly. She is the only daughter of the largest magic tool shop in Lamidjan. She's been smitten with that guy for 2 years now, and even became an adventurer just to be with him. This time, Shane's eyelids started twitching. So that's what you're saying, huh? That team, either they're fanatics, pretty boys, or dumb sweethearts? Shane felt the image of the adventurer team in his mind was crumbling, especially when he remembered Leon's elegant and handsome face that felt like a breath of spring. Shane never imagined that this team leader, no, this big shot, had such tricks up his sleeve. Compared to him, those toy boys kept by wealthy women in his previous life were simply weak. okay? Don't tell me he set his sights on you guys as well." Shane looked at Vivian and the others with an unervingly calm gaze. The expressions on Vivian and the rest immediately became even more subtle. Vivian even stuttered this sentence. "After all, I grew up with Riley. It's quite normal for him to want to get to know Riley through me. As for TL, he's very optimistic about her future, as she is a top talent of the kingdom. So he has always been keen on cultivating a good relationship with her. Lumia and Marika have also caught his attention to some extent, probably looking to cast a wide net in the hopes of investing early in those who may rise to prominence." These words nearly made Shane spit blood. Now, Shane only wanted to say one thing. What makes a hero? This is a hero, and it's a hero with a trash tier start. Truly an inspiration to fall down and worship. At least, Shane was starting to feel that, as the current hero, he was weak too. However, more than that, Shane wanted to say, is it really okay for such a team to take part in this mission? Even if that nouveau riche young master has some talent and a level that's not too low, the pretty boy team leader's level is much lower than the other people in the trade. As for the dumb sweetheart, since she's a merchant's daughter and became an adventurer for such a nonsensical reason, her level must not be too high either, right? Naturally, Vivian didn't think it was okay and was full of worries on spot. Probably the highest level in Leon's team is Mr. Mager, but Leon's team doesn't just consist of those three. With Leon's abilities, his team has at least dozens of members. That's why they can be one of the famous adventurer teams in Limigian, recognized by Mr. Bellin. Vivian said this, but her face showed she couldn't let it go at all. This task is entangled in many aspects. Leon and the others probably used some means to forcibly get involved, likely aiming for the accolades. This time, the escort was for a major criminal who plotted against numerous nobles and members of the royal family 10 years ago. Succeeding in delivering him to the royal capital would surely lead to great rewards considering the nobles and royal family's grudge against Killian. I think it's because of this that Mr. Mager's father arranged for his son to join this mission, and Leon wouldn't miss such an opportunity. If he can take the chance to establish a connection with the daughters of great nobles in the royal capital, he could be completely transformed. Vivian's words prompted Shane to blurt out without a second thought. "Sorry, I want to go back. This mission, it's simply impossible to..." Shane thought that since the mission was so important, Limigian would definitely bring out its elite, fully prepared to engage in an immortal battle with the old Demon Clan faction, initiating a spectacular attack and defense. But Shane must say, reality was indeed cruel. Now, after Vivian's explanation, Shane had basically understood that this mission was not an immortal battle at all, but rather a mixed bag where various secrets and dirty tricks were surfacing. Because escorting the special, major criminal Killian could yield great rewards from the nobles and royal family of the royal capital, many had essentially stopped acting to prevent the rescue by the old Demon Clan faction, and were instead acting for their own interests. Leon wanted to use this opportunity to find new encounters in the royal capital to elevate his own life. Mager's father wanted to vie for the great rewards of the royal capital, so he recklessly inserted his son's squad into the mission. Even Mr. Bellin, who admitted the involvement of Leon's team, was likely influenced by whispers from Mager's father, a close minister. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible to know about the rift between Vivian's team and Leon's team and still forcibly mediate in the name of the greater good. It couldn't be said that he didn't harbor intentions to make a breakthrough in the royal capital and win recognition and favor from the royal family and great nobles. Thus, these myriad issues had led to the current situation. This proved Shane's previous point that reality was everyone having their own thoughts, everyone having their own position, and each having their own standards and judgments, thus leading to each seemingly ordinary outcome being the result of multifaceted considerations and actions intertwined together. It could be said that this outcome seemed inevitable. After all, so-called nobles were just that. Each starting point is not necessarily for the world or society. More often, actions were taken for their own interests. However, this was undoubtedly porridge spoiled by rat feces, and not just one or two pieces. Then, given this situation, What twists Shane could expect next were clear as day. First, the internal problems are definitely there, followed by endless infighting, frequent conflicts, until one slaps another in the face, that one harbors intense hatred against this and thus seeks reckless revenge. Then this one wants more benefits, and that one desires more advantages, until finally, some villain will suddenly betray us by connecting with the old Demon Clan faction, expose the secret mission's itinerary, bringing forth a massacre, and thus failing the mission. Immediately after, to salvage the disaster, the protagonist will make a domineering appearance, not only babysitting a bunch of incompetent teammates, but also exposing his identity, leading to astonishment and admiration from the extras, and seizing this opportunity to infiltrate various major forces, becoming targeted by evil forces, and piquing the curiosity of acculturative leaders, causing all of them to come offering gifts, men offering their lives, and women offering their hands. This script could easily span millions of words. Thinking of all this, Shane felt an urge to curse, completely forgetting that his own position was that of the protagonist. How could this triteness not make Shane want to turn around and leave? At least, Shane couldn't foresee a future in which this mission would complete smoothly. Of course, that's what Vivian had said. They just want to gain fame and profit, not to fail the mission, including Leon and Mr. Mager and their sons, or even Mr. Bellin. Presumably, they all think this mission isn't that dangerous. Theoretically, although failing the mission could have severe consequences, the possibility of failure was very low. To distract the old Demon Clan faction spies, Lemidgen's nobles have been spreading false information all along, making the uninformed believe we would obediently wait for people from the royal capital. Riley has been continually reinforcing Lemidgen's defenses, giving outsiders the impression of preparing a defense against the old Demon Clan faction's attack and preventing Killian's escape, so no one would know Killian had already been secretly transported away. Under these circumstances, Riley and Bellin, among others, had meticulously planned an extremely secretive transport route, intentionally avoiding major roads and the public eye, making it impossible for the old Demon Clan faction to know Killian had been transported away or locate his transport team. Given this, in the eyes of people like Bellin, Leon, and Mr. Mager, the mission was actually not very risky. As long as there were no mistakes and the prisoner was honestly delivered to the royal capital, everyone could achieve their goals. So why not be happy about it? If it weren't for this, how could Mr. Bellin have agreed to let Mager and the others come in through the back door? And how would Mager's father have allowed his son to take such a great risk to gain merit? Not to mention Leon, the elder brother who relied on his looks. Since he had been aware of his own capacities from a young age, even if he wanted to stand out, he wouldn't joke about his own life. Hence, the issue of risk was the reason so many people were willing to act for the sake of profit, and some were even willing to take risks for it, let alone think that this time the risk was considered small. Therefore, the same old saying applies. The world is not short of fools, but neither is it short of wise people. Never think that what you come up with is the truth, or that you can guess everyone's actions. Otherwise, you will definitely be proven wrong. See, even President Riley, who liked to plan ahead, had not expected things to turn out this way. Had she? No. She probably had anticipated that someone would act on the profit motive of this mission, but had not expected it to be someone from Leon's team. And as for Shane, no matter how he looked at it, he could only foresee a cliché outcome where this mission would end in failure. Even if Vivian said the risk was small, to Shane, it was merely setting up a flag. All in all, Shane was really considering going home. But if you really want to give up, then I respect your wishes. Vivian hesitated for a moment before saying to Shane, but honestly, both Riley and I hope that you will join us. The reason was not just because Shane had hidden strengths that would make Vivian and Riley somewhat reassured. More importantly, there's someone both Riley and I think you should meet. Vivian lowered her voice and said to Shane, perhaps, after meeting, you will learn a lot about your identity. These words made Shane's expression fiercely change. Of course, you can also choose to talk about it later, since it's not a must to take this opportunity to go to the royal capital. Vivian smiled at Shane, saying, with Riley and me as intermediaries, Even though the person isn't someone you can meet whenever you want, there will still be a chance eventually. Just decide according to your own wishes. Upon hearing this, Shane fell silent. What silenced Shane was not what Vivian mentioned, but because he had realized that even if he gave up this mission, Vivian and the others would still carry it through. Under the circumstances where the rest were acting for profit, and only they truly wanted to contribute something to the town and kingdom, they were undertaking this mission fraught with flags, looking problematic in every aspect. Given that, this trip there's no choice but to go. Otherwise, once people from the old Demon Clan faction really appeared, the safety of Vivian and the others could be easily imagined. Shane could not just stand by and do nothing. So, wasn't this trip a forced decision after all? But Shane didn't want the terrible cliché plots he imagined to happen. What if, suddenly thinking of something, Shane laughed? If people from the Adventurers Guild saw Shane smile, they would surely shudder, wouldn't they? Because this meant the devil was about to make waves again. Just like that, everyone began preparing for the escort mission, with knights and adventurers running around the convoy, continuously bringing supplies, loading them into the carriages, or helping to move luggage, checking the horses and carriages. They were very careful and conscientious. As the undisputed leader, Lord Burin supervised everything with a stern expression and gaze. This mission involved a wide range of issues, and for Burin, it was also an opportunity not to be missed. Naturally, he sought to ensure nothing went wrong. Thus, Burin not only rigorously oversaw all the work, but occasionally stepped forward to inspect and give instructions, spreading a tense atmosphere. Under this influence, Alice's team became more meticulous as well. Vivian and others silently carried on with their preparations. Even Leon's team, under Leon's supervision and constant instructions, became exceedingly cautious. Only Mager seemed distracted, glancing over at Vivian's team, observing the busy Marika, seemingly eager to come over. However, even Mager did not want to cause any disturbance on this occasion. After all, the leader of the team was Lord Burin, his father's immediate superior and a leader whom Mager would need to serve in the future. His prestigious family background was useless in front of this man, making Mager completely dare not act rashly. Thankfully, Mager, looking restless, eventually restrained himself and did not come over, which let the quietly observing Marika heave a sigh of relief. Of course, Marika didn't know that Mager was able to hold back, thanks to TL. Whenever Mager looked over, he would see TL's cold, piercing gaze, making him shiver and unable to move his feet. Regrettably, Mager's actual fear wasn't Burin, but TL. Previously, it was TL who had discovered his ill intentions towards Marika, and then proceeded to break all of Mager's limbs without any mercy. Afterwards, had it not been for his father getting the great priest from the temple to perform recovery magic on him, Mager would have been crippled and couldn't possibly be standing here. This made Mager both hate and fear TL, daring not to make any rash moves. Who could blame him? His family background was equally useless when it came to dealing with TL, already at a disadvantage, and since TL was a prominent genius of the kingdom, consistently receiving wide attention, with Riley backing her up, unless it involved a direct attempt on her life. If nobles were disadvantaged by her, they could only acknowledge her superiority. In such circumstances, Mager could only watch TL with immense wariness, hesitating several times, and gave up on approaching. So, all preparations continued smoothly, maintaining a delicate balance. It was Vivian who, after scanning her surroundings, muttered curiously, "Where is Shane? Why can't I see him?" Vivian then realized that at some point, Shane had vanished. Did he go back? Vivian grew puzzled. After leaving the decision to Shane, Vivian did not directly ask for an answer, but thought it best to give Shane time to consider, and so she began preparing with the others. Now that Shane was gone, Vivian could only assume that he had finally decided to abandon this mission. That's probably for the best. Vivian felt reassured rather than regretful. If Shane had stayed, considering the delicate relationship between Vivian's team and Leon's team, it would be hard to ensure that he wouldn't be bothered by people like Mager. Considering this, it was perhaps better that Shane had given up on the mission. As for meeting that person, maybe next time there's an opportunity. Thinking of that person, Vivian couldn't help but smile wryly. Though that person was busy, held a special status, and was not easy to meet, if she had Riley's help, there should still be a chance. Thus, Vivian thought this and calmed down, focusing on continuing their preparations. And they did prepare for quite some time. Until all the preparations were complete, Burin, overseeing everything, finally gave the order. Bring the prisoner over. Suddenly, the entire scene fell silent. Everyone's expressions tensed, ready for action. Vivian and her team also looked solemn, watching ahead. Before long, the figure appeared. Surrounded by knights, a delicate man slowly approached. That was Killian. At that moment, Killian was bound by various restraining magic tools. These restraining magic tools were almost all the top-level magic tools from within Lemidgen, some obstructing the flow of magic power, some with extraordinary toughness and hardness, and some extremely heavy, suppressing the prisoner's mobility and ensuring that Killian, a level 77 Demon Clan criminal, could not escape. Yet, Killian maintained an expressionless face, and his eyes showed no fluctuation, bringing an eerily calm presence that was profoundly unsettling. At least, many knights and adventurers began to feel fear. That is, how terrifying. Whispers like these periodically arose, causing even Burin to look serious. Leon and Eudelis were on the verge of breaking out in a cold sweat, and even Mager felt the urge to shiver, showing the immense pressure that Killian exerted. Vivian and her companions were also extremely serious. That person, he's strong. TL gripped her blade tightly, staring intensely at Killian. Is that the mastermind behind the large-scale assassination from 10 years ago from the old Demon Clan faction? It's truly terrifying. Lumuya and Marika also grew timid and nervous. Even Vivian took a deep breath internally. How on earth did Shane subdue him without a scratch? Seeing Killian in person, Vivian couldn't imagine any powerful magic tool that could enable a level 10 novice adventurer to achieve such a feat. No wonder the Night Order has been trying to find out about that magic tool. Vivian smirked to herself, unnoticed. However, Vivian also knew that Shane must not have used any magic tools. So many secrets, not just Riley. Now even I'm getting curious. Vivian murmured quietly to herself. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Killian was pushed into a cage-like carriage. All preparations were thus complete. Good. Burin nodded forcefully, ready to give the command to depart. However, just then, a knight ran over in a panic. Lord Burin. The knight, with a face full of panic, whispered something into Burin's ear. What? Hearing the words, Burin's expression finally changed. What happened? What's going on? The rest were utterly puzzled. As for Vivian, watching the scene unfold, she couldn't shake a bad feeling that was unsettlingly growing inside her. Her instincts told Vivian that trouble was on the horizon, and more troubling, it might even involve their own people. Lemidgen, the street at the East City Gate. Amid a tumultuous and hurried sound of footsteps, the knights and adventurers carrying out the secret escort mission, led by Burin, rushed along the road as if being whipped to go faster. Vivian, TL, Lumia, and Marika, a party of 4, were among them, but their brows were deeply furrowed, with expressions of confusion and utter surprise. It wasn't only Vivian and the others. Burin, Leon, Alice, Eudelis, and Mager all wore similar expressions, prompting their hasty rush toward the direction of the city gate. And by the time they reached the gate, it was already overcrowded, packed with throngs of citizens. It seemed as if the citizens were trying to leave the city, peering out curiously as if drawn by something, buzzing with excitement. The gate's guards were holding them back, not allowing them to exit the city. Lord Burin, Lord Burin. Seeing Burin leading the large group towards them, the guards finally breathed a sigh of relief and called out. But Burin didn't even bother to acknowledge them. He simply led everyone through the city gate and out of Lemidgen. However, just as everyone left the city and stepped into the outskirts, an anomaly suddenly occurred. Boom! Accompanied by an earth-shaking roar, a severe explosion occurred ahead. The blast spread out like shockwaves, attacking the surroundings. The people from Burin's party, who had just hurried out of the city, didn't even have time to react before being struck by the blast wave. Ah, Lord Leon. Taken by surprise, Lumia, Marika, and Eudelis were blown away, crying out in shock. The others were similar, screaming in alarm as if hit by a sudden typhoon, being blown around haphazardly, nearly collapsing to the ground. No, Leon and Mager had already fallen to the ground, one covered in dirt, the other screaming in pain, and to those unaware, it might seem that they suffered from some inhumane treatment. Only Burin, as a level 68 knight, almost reflexively drew his longsword from his waist, blocking in front of himself. Vivian quickly pulled out a shield and placed it in front of Lu Muya and Marika, shielding them from the incoming blast wave. TL went even further. With a flash of her blade, she split the oncoming wind, dissipating it into a gentle breeze. Be careful! Aside from these three, the only other who could react to this sudden blast was Alice. He held onto his teammate's shoulders, firmly bracing against the wind, steadying everyone. It was not clear how much time passed before the blast winds finally began to subside. Only then did everyone see what lay ahead, and one by one, they were all stunned. Before their eyes, the plain that should have been unremarkable had somehow become a scorched earth. Not only was everything charred black, but there were also massive craters dotting the landscape, a terrifying sight. In front of this horrifying scene stood a young man with a long, strip-shaped package on his shoulder and holding something in his hand. How did you all get here? As if surprised, the young man turned his head around as though he heard the commotion behind him. His words filled with astonishment, yet for some reason, there was a slight smile in his eyes. Shane. Vivian couldn't help but murmur the other's name. It was indeed Shane, who had mysteriously disappeared before. Witnessing Shane standing before that eerie scene, the group of knights and adventurers finally came to their senses and began to clamor. What happened here? God, how did it turn out like this? So terrifying. The knights and adventurers all began to talk in a panicked manner. Not just ordinary knights and adventurers. Even Leon, Alice, Magran, and Eudelis felt their hearts racing at the scene before them. TL could not help but mutter softly, "What is this man planning to do now?" Clearly, TL had already started to feel a headache coming on. If even TL felt this way, then Lu Muya and Marika, exchanging looks while trembling in fear, went without saying. Burin was also trembling in fear. It wasn't that he was timid, but the sight before him was indeed terrifying, almost making Burin think that the old Demon Clan faction had launched a premature attack. However, Shane appeared completely unperturbed, even somewhat pleased, prompting Burin to ask involuntarily, "What are you doing here?" Burin's tone carried a hint of interrogation. It must be said, it was indeed imposing, capable of bringing about a great sense of oppression. However, far from being scared, Shane just scratched his head sheepishly. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare everyone. I was just testing out the new magic tools I got. If it frightened everyone, I am truly sorry." Shane said these words. Testing new magic tools. All present suddenly had their attention captivated by Shane's statement. Vivian and TL, in particular, stared at Shane with wide-eyed astonishment. Shane, unconcerned, scratched his head as if he truly felt embarrassed, chuckling to himself. "You all should know, right? Last time, it was thanks to a powerful magic tool that I was able to take down a person from the old Demon Clan faction in almost a surprise attack. Since then, I've developed a bit of an interest in powerful magic tools." Shane's words caused many eyes to turn toward him, especially Burin, who, as if he had only just noticed Shane's presence, suddenly exclaimed in realization, "So you're the new adventurer that President Riley took notice of after subduing Killian?" That's right, said Shane with a cheery smile. "I apologize for the disturbance. I truly am sorry." He spoke as such, but there was not the slightest hint of embarrassment on Shane's face. But the others could hardly focus on this at the moment, for their attention had been completely captivated by Shane's recent topic. Are you saying you were testing new magic tools here? Burren glanced at the terrifying scene of scorched earth before them, and with a shift in his gaze toward Shane, he asked in a deep voice, "Are you telling me that all this was caused by your experimentation with magic tools?" "Well, that's about the size of it," Shane admitted unabashedly, adding, "The magic tool I used on Killian last time was just too powerful, and it left a deep impression on me. I couldn't help but want to replicate that kind of tool, so I had someone make it. The result was a bit mediocre, but I guess it's passable." Upon hearing this, the same thought appeared in everyone's mind. If this is considered mediocre, then what kind of magic tools would actually be satisfying? But gradually, realizing what Shane meant, a few people's eyes sparkled with interest. Like Leon, like Mager, and like Burren. Out of them, Mager was the least able to contain his eagerness and blurted loudly, "Hey, are you saying you've got more of those powerful magic tools?" To this question, Shane responded without hesitation. "Of course," Shane answered proudly, with his head held high. "And I have quite a lot of them, you know." All at once, a gleam appeared in everyone's eyes. That gleam was named greed. Even before this, Vivian had mentioned more than once the great interest that the Night Order had for Shane's so-called powerful magic tools. It was only natural, although it was by means of an almost surprise attack that the success had been achieved, a magic tool that allowed a level 10 adventurer newbie like Shane to defeat a level 77 expert of the old Demon Clan was bound to be alluring to anyone, wouldn't it? If one possessed such a powerful magic tool, they'd have confidence in whatever they did. Especially for nobles like Burren and Mager, getting their hands on such magic tools would undoubtedly be a very favorable affair. And if these magic tools could be mass-produced, one didn't even need to think about the profits that could be made and the benefits that could be obtained. Take Mager, for example. His father, upon learning of Shane's exploits, had enviously and sourly said, "If I had such a strong magic tool, I too could have defeated the fugitives from the old Demon Clan faction." Of course, if such magic tools could be mass-produced, whether it was to enhance the strength of the knights within their territory or to sell them off in exchange for wealth, the benefits would be unimaginable. Regrettably, such strong magic tools were almost always of a treasured grade and expensive to make, requiring the collection of who knows how many precious materials and the exceptional skill of a magic tool master to even have a chance of creating them successfully, and most of them were one-time use items. Thinking of mass production was quite difficult. Thus, after Vivian and Riley, on behalf of Shane, declared that there was no second such magic tool, everyone interested, including Burren, showed some disappointment. But they were already psychologically prepared and quickly accepted the fact. In this way, there remained only one question in the minds of these people. That was, why did Riley, possessing such a powerful magic tool, not use it herself, and instead generously give it to a completely unrelated newbie? Moreover, this newbie was only level 10 and had already turned 20 this year, not even having mastered a single skill. With such mediocre, or rather extremely low potential, what made him worthy of Riley presenting him with such a level of magic tool for protection? It was completely illogical. Yet Riley remained silent on the matter, merely acknowledging it unilaterally. Aside from that, she revealed no further information, leaving everyone else no choice but to give up pursuing the truth. In this manner, to outsiders, Shane's magic tool was considered a self-protection gift from Riley, while to Lumuya and Marika, it was claimed to be a present from TL. Even if later Lumuya and Marika heard something else outside, TL could use the excuse because President Riley asked me to give it to him, just like the funding last time to cover up this colossal lie for Shane. But now, what had Shane said? He said that the magic tools had been successfully mass-produced. That made Burren, Mager, and even Leon and Eudelis, who was the only daughter of a magic tool shop proprietor, their eyes light up all at once. This, only Vivian and TL, the two insiders, showed a look of astonishment. On seeing this, Shane merely glanced at the two of them. They exchanged looks, their expressions shifting, and after hesitating for a while, they chose to be silent. Under such circumstances, Burin took a deep breath and fixed his gaze on Shane. "Is this true?" Burin asked with a stern face. Looking at Shane, "This isn't something that can be achieved easily. You realize that, right?" "Indeed." Leon surprisingly also chimed in from one side, whether intentional or unintentional, but like Burin, staring at Shane with a smile that seemed pleasant as a breath of spring air, not to mention whether magic tools of that level could be mass-produced. Even if it were possible, it's hard to say if the creator's skills would be up to standard, right? And the materials, such powerful magic tools definitely require very precious materials to create. Eudelis, coming from a magic tool shop background, made the most credible claim. Sizing up Shane while speaking with a smirk, "You don't mean to say that you could meet these conditions, do you?" A mere level 10 newbie adventurer. No matter how one looked at it, it seemed impossible to meet these conditions to mass-produce powerful magic tools. Therefore, even though everyone had their own thoughts, they couldn't help but harbor doubts. Shane simply chuckled and said one line. "Of course I couldn't do it," Shane calmly stated. "However, there's a very powerful mage in Lemidgen who can manage this feat." His words surprised everyone at first, and then the expressions of several people changed in unison. "Are you talking about that one?" Burin asked, as if he had come to a realization. "Yes," Shane replied seriously. "Otherwise, why would she refuse to see anyone else and only agreed to see me alone? It's because she's interested in that powerful magic tool." Who Shane was referring to was clear without saying. It was undoubtedly Lisha. In other words, Shane had shifted the blame again. The others seemed to know a little about Lisha and didn't dare to say more. After all, if it was her, it might really be possible to recreate a magic tool of such level. Because if it was her who had taken action, then the idea of obtaining a large number of magic tools, or even the creation method, was undoubtedly very difficult. Thinking this, Burin felt some disappointment, as did Eudelis, and even Mager looked dejected, while only Leon was furtively muttering to himself about that one also appears to be a beauty. Only Lumuya and Marika still looked confused, but since Vivian and TL remained silent, they too didn't feel like speaking up and just quietly observed. "So, you're testing out magic tools here on our behalf?" Burin pressed on with his question, putting aside his disappointment. "That's right," Shane honestly responded. However, in the next second, Shane's tone suddenly shifted. "These magic tools will now come in very handy. They must be thoroughly tested first." This statement caused another surprised pause from crowd. "Come in handy?" Mager asked bluntly without any reservations. "What does that mean?" Shane seemed not to see Mager's blunt manner at all, maintaining a cheerful demeanor. But the next moment, the words that came from his mouth made everyone's expression involuntarily change. No choice, since she has been pursued by the old Demon Clan faction for a full 10 years, always reluctantly fleeing. Now that she's gotten her hands on such powerful magic tools, of course, she wants to take her revenge, right? Shane said with his usual startling frankness. "This is a great opportunity. Lemidgen had to provide cover for your secret missions, deceive the eyes of the old Demon Clan faction, making them think Killian is still here, leading them all here. Originally, according to President Riley, Lemidgen needed to release the news after you had left for a certain period and were impossible to catch up with, claiming that Killian was already escorted away to lead their targets out of town before the old Demon Clan faction made their move. Now it's not necessary," Shane expressed gleefully. "With so many powerful magic tools, Lemidgen can simply counter and capture more people from the old Demon Clan faction. This is indeed a greater achievement than capturing Killian." Burin and the others quivered heavily. Then their eyes lit up once again. "You? Is what you're saying true?" At this moment, regardless of Burin and Leon, Mager couldn't help but speak out. "Isn't this something?" Shane seemed oblivious to the thoughts of Mager and the others, speaking carelessly without any guard. Although Killian was one of the masterminds behind the large-scale assassination 10 years ago, he was just one of them. I heard there was another mastermind with a higher level at that time who killed even more than Killian did, and it seems he even planned this project himself. If he shows up to save Killian, bringing along other members of the old Demon Clan faction, then capturing them all in one net. This achievement, even without Shane finishing, the others could understand. It's undeniable that if this was true, the accolades would be far greater than just capturing a Killian. And if catching a Killian could lead to so many benefits, what would even greater accolades involve? Could I be granted nobility status? Leon's heart was aflame. Would the royal family take notice and elevate my family's rank along with me? Mager couldn't help but get excited. Would it lead to more benefits for my father's business, even perhaps an arranged marriage from the royal family, making Lord Leon and I husband and wife? Eudelus's mind began to wander as well. As for Burin, he was no exception. It was already a great discontent among the other knight captains, attendant lords, and the vassals of the noble families about me becoming the knight captain within the territory before reaching level 70. They used this as an excuse more than once to cause trouble for me, preventing me from being recognized by most of the public outside Lamidjan. If I could now garner such substantial accolades, they would have nothing left to say. I might even replace my older brother as the heir of the Mula family, becoming the next Marquis Mula. Thinking of this, Burin couldn't help but be moved. Only Alice, at this time, raised an objection. Has President Riley agreed to this? Alice frowned and spoke bluntly to Shane. Are you sure you can succeed? Don't end up causing harm to Lamidjan instead. Alice's words snapped everyone back to reality. It wasn't just Alice. Even Vivian couldn't help but interject. Beto is a stronger demon than Killian, and even now, the one from Lamidjan. Even if you can subdue Killian, that doesn't necessarily mean you can subdue Beto. If it fails, Lamidjan will suffer severe consequences. The risk is too high. Not knowing Shane's plan, Vivian tentatively reminded him, lest Shane was truly planning to proceed in such a manner. Rest assured, Shane nonchalantly responded, there's nothing that a magic tool cannot solve. If there is, then use two. This arrogant approach left everyone speechless. But wasn't that the truth? Unlike during Killian's time, this time they had access to not just two, but mass-produced magic tools. So, if they were willing to use a large number of such high-level magic tools without regard for losses, wouldn't even a demon of level 90 much harder to handle than level 77? And up disgraced? This means it could work. Everyone immediately became restless. You're called Shane, right? Finally, Burin spoke up, addressing Shane. You've really outdone yourself. Thus, this matter, let me support you in it. Burin had intended to say just that. From Burin's perspective, since they could wait for the people from the old Demon Clan faction to fall right into their trap and capture them all at once, there was no need for secret missions. They could just prepare thoroughly here and resolve everything at once, thus earning more and greater merits. But just at that moment, Shane changed his tone and interrupted Burin. Speaking of which, I haven't thanked you all yet, Shane said with what appeared to be great gratitude. You all went to such lengths to help me escort Killian to the royal capital. I really feel bad about it. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone, including Burin, was taken aback. Help you? Burin, Leon, Mager, Eudelus, and Alice were all puzzled. How could this be? Everyone wondered as such. But the next second, Shane's words changed everyone's expressions dramatically. And it was unprecedented, because although I relied on the power of magic tools to successfully subdue Killian, subduing such a heavyweight criminal and escorting him to the royal capital, I presume the kingdom won't be stingy with my reward, right? Just thinking about it makes me excited. Shane's elated words made everyone's hearts thump, and they finally realized something was wrong. That's right. It was Shane who subdued Killian, not them. In other words, Shane was the real hero. They were just slightly involved. It wasn't that everyone had forgotten this, but typically within a region, if someone achieved a great feat, unless it was an event that shocked the entire kingdom and contributed greatly to the kingdom, demanding recognition of the person who performed the feat, rewards were usually given according to a hierarchical system. For instance, if a peasant accidentally discovered a relic of immense value that even the kingdom couldn't ignore, then he wouldn't receive a direct reward from the kingdom, but rather a reward from the noble of the region who learned of this discovery. Then, this noble would reward the peasant and report this deed to the lord of the region, who would see this as the noble's own achievement and reward the noble accordingly, instead of directly rewarding the peasant. Furthermore, this lord would also report to the kingdom, and the kingdom would similarly treat it as the lord's accomplishment and reward the lord. This was the so-called hierarchical reward system. After all, a peasant couldn't possibly directly contact the royal family to report this, could he? Thus, even in past lives, rewards were handed down layer by layer, and by the time they reached those directly involved, it wasn't clear how many levels had been bypassed, and there was no guarantee that the reward's original value was retained. Such was the case with Shane's achievement. As a level 10 novice adventurer, it was appropriate for the manager of Lamidjan to reward him. He wasn't qualified or connected enough to reach the royal family and receive a direct reward. In light of this, Burin thought that he just needed to reward Shane afterward, and then he could logically receive the direct reward from the kingdom. But now, the situation had changed. Seeing the expressions on everyone's faces, Shane's smile grew even broader. You want to compete for merit? Let there be no merit to compete for. That was Shane's intention. Certainly, if it were only for the achievement of subduing Killian, Shane would not have attracted the attention of the kingdom, nor would he have received direct rewards from it. At least, to many people, Shane's deeds were nothing more than those of a level 10 novice adventurer who, due to good fortune, gained the favor of Riley and obtained powerful magic tools, thereby succeeding in subduing Killian only because of his carelessness. This achievement felt to others as if I could do it myself if I were in his place, similar to the aforementioned incident of a commoner stumbling upon a relic. To be rewarded by the nobles within his territory would already be a stroke of great luck. It would not be possible for such good luck to capture the special notice of the kingdom, leading to a summons and reward. It was because of this that Burin and others had planned this secret mission, hoping to transport Killian to the royal capital and receive direct rewards from a kingdom. Otherwise, Burin could have simply handed over the prisoner to his own Marquis family to deal with. Surely, with the capabilities of Marquis Mula's family, it would have been possible to detain a level 77 Demon Clan criminal, rather than it turning into a hot potato. Moreover, if Burin had no ulterior motives at all, he could have sought help from the surrounding towns. In that case, being from the same territory, the nobles of the other towns would surely have taken the matter seriously and sent support to ensure that Lamidjan would not have to fear the rescue threats from the old Demon Clan faction. But Burin was worried that this would result in the credit being shared among others, which is why he wanted to monopolize the glory and handle the problem with Lamidjan on his own. On this matter, Riley had raised objections, but Burin insisted on having his own way, leaving her no choice but to plan and prepare for Lamidjan, attempting to eliminate any accidents and casualties. But now, circumstances had changed, and it was very possible that others would be making fruitless efforts, leaving all the credit to Shane alone. As long as Shane truly joined forces with Lisha and used a large quantity of magic tools as a means to round up the members of the old Demon Clan faction in one fell swoop, then this time, Shane would likely find it impossible to avoid the attention of the kingdom. Having made contact with Lisha and assisting in the mass production of such powerful magic tools, as well as taking down so many criminals of the old Demon Clan faction, including Beto, who was even more important than Killian, how could the kingdom possibly ignore Shane? By then, Shane would surely be summoned by the kingdom, and all the credit, including the subduing of Killian, would be directly attributed to him. In that case, even if Burin and the others successfully transported Killian to the royal capital, it would be no more than a mere formality. What's worse, if the attack by the old Demon Clan faction and the resulting pressure were all drawn to Lamidjan's side, and they failed to notice the transportation on Burin and the other side, their secret mission would become completely risk-free, leading to an extremely smooth completion. If it really came to that, it would indeed give people the impression that I could do it myself if I were in his place, and whether they could receive a reward would be a complete unknown. Therefore, Mager was the first to panic. "Don't you dare do that," the young master of the noble family shouted without a second thought. Shane blinked, looking quite perplexed. Why not? Because Mager couldn't think of a single reason, getting increasingly flustered, until he simply blurted out imperiously, "Just because I said you can't do that, you can't." He was outright dismissing the need for reason. On the other hand, Leon immediately calmed down and, after a quick thought, had found something to say. Just as Alice and Vivian mentioned earlier, the risk is too great. Leon spoke earnestly, as if considering Shane's welfare. No one can be certain that these magic tools will be effective against Beto and the rest of the old Demon Clan faction. What if they really don't work? That's right. Eudelis quickly agreed. Lord Leon is so reasonable. Rather than fervent agreement, this was more like her being smitten. The naive and sweet lady would unthinkingly echo whatever Leon said. I also feel it's inappropriate. Burin fell silent for a moment, then looked toward Shane and said, "We might give up, but we can't let the citizens of Lemidian take this risk with us. If something really does happen, our guilt will be the greatest." So, I also disapprove of this plan. It seemed that the Knight Captain was also ready to use every trick in his arsenal to prevent this from happening. Oh, what should I do then? Shane seemed very disappointed. So these magic tools won't be of any use at all? How could that be? Burin's mind raced, and he quickly said, "In fact, you can hand over the magic tools to us, and we will continue with the original plan for the secret mission. We just need President Riley to leak the transportation information in advance, making the old Demon Clan faction turn back to search for us. Then we can round up all the members of the old Demon Clan faction together, right?" Upon hearing Burin's words, the rest also had a revelation, instantly understanding Burin's calculation. Vivian, TL, Lumuya, and Marika, among others, frowned. They had figured out. Burin and his group were preparing to compete for glory once more, turning a mission that should have been an opportunity for Shane to shine alone into one where the credit belonged to everyone. Although if they had stayed in Lemidian, waiting for the old Demon Clan faction to walk into their trap, they could have shared the glory, but that would turn the event into an anecdote like Shane and Lisha collaborated to mass-produce powerful magic tools, distributing them to everyone in Lemidian and gathering the strength of the entire town to withstand the onslaught of the old Demon Clan faction. But if they continued with the original plan, it would become an event like the Secret Mission Execution Squad, led by Burin Mura, lured away the old Demon Clan faction and, with the combined strength of the entire team, stood against the old Demon Clan faction. Between the two, the latter scenario was undoubtedly more impressive, would receive the full attention of the kingdom, and could minimize Shane's personal feats, highlighting others more. Just a change in form and context would lead to a completely different result. This was Burin's calculation. Immediately, Leon, Eudelis, and Mager voiced their opinions one after another. "I think this is a good idea. We can also ensure the town's safety this way, right? If that's the case, just hand over the magic tools." The three of them, one smiling innocently, one nodding incessantly, and one quite unabashedly, did not notice the quasi-smile in Shane's eyes. Of course, on the surface, Shane still put on a troubled face. "It doesn't really matter to me, but these magic tools are just prototypes after all, and they require very strict conditions to be used successfully. I wonder if everyone can." Before he could finish his sentence, Burin preemptively hammered down the conclusion. "Don't worry, we are all knights or adventurers. No matter how difficult to use the magic tools are, we will successfully operate them." As he said this, Burin had another thought in his mind. If rookies at level 10 can use it successfully, how could we possibly fail to use it? That was the gist of it. The others seemed to think this way too, each one making their guarantees. "Well, what?" Shane kept his troubled expression, but finally nodded his reluctant agreement, prompting laughter from everyone around. Only Vivian and TL exchanged glances. What exactly is he planning? I have a feeling these guys are in for a bad time. That's what the two of them thought. And so, the matter was settled. Not long after, everyone got ready and finally left Lemidian with Killian in tow. President Riley was also informed about the situation and, after a bout of silence, agreed to the plan. Following behind the convoy, Shane couldn't help but recall the last remark. Riley, truly helpless, had thrown at him before leaving. Don't go too far. Remembering this warning, Shane murmured to himself, I can't promise that. If one was going to be extravagant, they had to do it to the fullest, right? Shane smiled. Rumble, rumble. In a series of wheel sounds, a procession of carriages was rushing along a secluded path, stirring up clouds of dust. This mighty convoy looked just like a caravan of merchants, not just dressed as traders, but also laden with many goods. One would believe that even if someone saw this on such a remote path, they would definitely assume it was merely a merchant preparing to do business in a nearby town or a large merchant house transporting important goods. Unfortunately, it was all a disguise. Those dressed as merchants were actually knights, and the cargo was merely food and supplies and goods for camping in the wild. The escort squad of Lamijan was thus disguised as a merchant convoy, making their way. Even Burin, who rode a splendid horse, had donned a cloak, disguising himself as a merchant's guard, while the adventurers remained as they were, with no change in their attire. This was because it was very common for caravans escorting merchants to commission such services in any town, and having adventurers travel with merchant convoys was nothing out of the ordinary. Therefore, the adventurers were the only ones who needed no disguise. However, whether it was Leon, Mager, or Eudelis, at that moment they all held a tattered sheepskin parchment, following Shane's lead with a skeptical look on their faces, as if questioning life itself. Is this really a powerful magic tool capable of defeating a level 77 member of the demon clan? Leon held the dilapidated parchment with a doubtful expression. It wasn't just Leon. Mager had turned the paper over several times, scrutinizing it without discovering anything remarkable. This was to say nothing of Eudelis, who hailed from a magic tool shop and whose eyes were full of confusion. Isn't this just a piece of scrap paper? Eudelis spoke with extreme uncertainty. I haven't detected any magic power at all from it, nor can I see any precious materials included within. Obviously, Eudelis was quite skeptical about the so-called powerful magic tool in her hands. And naturally, Lumuya and Marika felt the same way. It smells just like ordinary paper. This was a conclusion Lumuya came to. I haven't sensed any magic power either. Marika was serious, but could not hide the skepticism in her eyes. Only Vivian and TL, holding the so-called powerful magic tool in their hands, looked at each other speechlessly. Nearby, Alice was continually flipping the sheepskin parchment as if trying to glean something from it. If he hadn't been worried about potential issues, he might have already begun to tear it apart violently, to see what made this trash-like item any different. It's worth mentioning that Burin was also here, silently watching Shane. But Shane didn't feel guilty. Instead, he spoke with great sincerity. Even if you ask me like this, I can't answer your questions, Shane said frankly. I too received it from someone else's hands. If even you can't detect anything extraordinary, then I certainly can't. Hearing this, the others didn't object. In fact, several people nodded in agreement. Perhaps there's a trick here that we can't see through. After all, it's the work of that person. Burin and Leon commented as such. Indeed, though Eudelis felt somewhat unwilling to concede, she still said, At least, I completely do not recognize the magical text inscribed here, but it looks very mysterious and extraordinary. Perhaps the secret lies within these magical texts. The only thing extraordinary about the magic tool, which seemed just like a piece of scrap paper in everyone's hands, was that it was inscribed with mysterious text that none of them recognized. That was the only feature of this so-called magic tool that could claim to be out of the ordinary. But why do I feel like the ink on it is still wet? Vivian, perhaps we should hold back some of our comments. Vivian and TL hesitated to speak their minds and eventually chose silence instead. The rest once again gathered around Shane to confirm the usage conditions of the magic tool. As long as we chant the magical text inscribed here accurately, we can activate this magic tool, right? Burin looked at Shane for confirmation. Yes, Shane nodded vigorously. You must chant it accurately and without any deviation, otherwise it won't be successfully activated. That's the usage condition that one told me about. I also practiced for a long time before I managed to succeed a few times. Otherwise, I wouldn't have needed to go outside the city to experiment. As he spoke, Shane even put on the appearance of someone who had endured arduous training, as if reminiscing those tough yet fulfilling days, revealing a gaze that looked off into the distant horizon. Seeing this, the crowd started to believe him a bit. Can I try it? Burin pondered for a while before deciding to give it a try. Of course, Shane didn't feel any guilt and even seemed as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Once again showing a serious expression, he said sternly, "Remember to chant it exactly as I taught you, and loudly, understand?" Understood. Burin seemed to be intimidated by Shane's seriousness, his mood becoming somber while he couldn't help but tighten his facial expression. Then, I'll start. Instantly, everyone's gaze gathered on Burin. Under such scrutiny, Burin took a deep breath and raised the magic tool high. I am a pig with dreams. Come and kill me if you dare. Come on. This so-called magic spell was chanted out by Burin. Nobody understood the meaning of these words, because they were not the text or language of this world, but rather from the world of a certain hero in his previous life. Shane couldn't help but burst out laughing. The rest of the people, however, looked stern. This was because despite Burin clearly using a powerful magic tool, nothing happened. Did I do something wrong? Burin knitted his brows tightly, confusion apparent in his eyes. Shane immediately suppressed his smile. Well, it probably wasn't loud enough. Shane changed his expression in a split second, still as serious and earnest as before. You must chant loudly, without any mistakes. So, Lord Bellin tried again. Upon hearing that, Burin nodded heavily, took a deep breath, and once again raised the magic tool. I'm a pig with dreams. Come and kill me if you dare. Come on. This time, Burin put all his energy into it, his voice loud and clear, like a flood breaching its banks, echoing across the fields. Consequently, including himself, nobody noticed a faint chant that had simultaneously begun. Tinder, at that moment, astonishing magic power erupted. Boom! Accompanied by a violent explosion sound. A place a certain distance from the caravan burst into flames and smoke, wild surges of heat rolling out, the shockwave and blast wind spreading. Success! I did it! Burin was overjoyed. The others inhaled sharply. Even Vivian and TL were caught by surprise. What terrifying power! Even upper-level magic might not have this kind of power, right? No wonder even level 77 of the Demon Clan couldn't withstand it. Too amazing. Everybody started to react with surprise and excitement. Especially Eudelis, the daughter of the magic tool shop, and Marika, a mage, who both had their eyes light up, looking at the parchment in their hands as if it were a treasure. Of course, all the others felt the same. Unnoticed by them, Shane at their side was struggling to suppress his laughter. No one on Shane's side noticed anything unusual. Everyone was just immersed in excitement, looking at the parchment in their hands, their eyes alight with excitement, and even Lu Muya and Marika were no exception. In the end, even Alice seemed to no longer doubt the power of the magic tools in her hand, and she carefully tucked it away as if it were a treasure. Even Vivian and TL were starting to doubt whether the parchment in their hands was truly a powerful magic tool. That is to say, no one present had noticed that the magic had not been activated from the parchment, but had been triggered by Shane himself. There was no helping it. Shane, now possessing a level 10 magic manipulation skill, had godlike control over magic power. Concealing the fluctuations of magic power was a piece of cake for him. Under these circumstances, unless someone present had a level 10 magic perception skill, it would be impossible for them to detect the magic power that Shane had deliberately controlled. Even Marika, despite being a natural-born mage elf, could not perceive the source of the magic power. Was there anyone in the room with a level 10 magic perception skill? The answer was naturally no. Therefore, people began to eagerly try one after another in their excitement. I want to try too. Mager, unable to contain his patience, grabbed the magic tool before anyone else. Come on. Put some more effort into it. Following Shane's instructions, Mager used his loudest voice without hesitation, and his proud tone and extremely arrogant attitude were utterly detestable. Lightning, at that moment, a faint chanting voice mixed with a booming sound allowed the massive magic power to burst forth, turning into a dazzling and swift streak of lightning. Everyone just saw a flash before their eyes, and then the lightning struck the distant ground, exploding with blinding light like a thunderbolt. Thus, a charred crater appeared on the distant land, still smoking continuously. Huh, that was amazing. So powerful. Mager was beyond excited, acting as if he had displayed this power himself. Almost nose in the air, barely stopping short of making everyone kneel down and chant long live. Let me try as well. Seeing this, Eudelis, the daughter of the magic tool shop owner, could not hold back any longer and eagerly lifted the magic tool as well. I'll try it too. Leon, still wearing his charming, spring-like smile, couldn't completely hide the excitement in his eyes. In this way, both of them started trying to use the magic tool. Eudelis shouted the shortest, but also the most absurd magic spell among the group. If you are a man, come at me. Leon shouted a phrase that could terrify the women he had seduced with a lifetime of tricks. Unfortunately, not a single person present understood the meaning of these two phrases. However, Shane, as the only person who could understand, finally couldn't hold back and burst out laughing. What's wrong? Shane. Vivian and TL were startled by Shane's sudden burst of laughter. On the other hand, Leon and Eudelis, seeing that nothing happened after shouting magic spell, became even more serious. It seems we didn't shout loud enough or chant quite correctly. We still need to practice, Lord Leon. The two exchanged opinions like this, and then, as if determined to improve, started practicing. If you're a man, come on up. Yamide. If you're a man, come on up. Yamide. At this moment, Leon and Eudelis kept practicing the use of the magic spell, getting more and more vigorous as they shouted louder and louder, their voices almost forming echoes. Pfft. Ha ha ha. Shane laughed so hard that his stomach hurt. He could barely hold back the tears and felt his abs might cramp up. Watching Shane like this, Lumuya and Marika started to worry, wondering if he was sick. Vivian and TL seemed to sense something was wrong as their eyes twitched. TL, I know. Whatever that spell is, even if it kills me, I won't chant it. The two silently made this decision. Of course, those unaware of all this, like Leon and Eudelis, seemed to have infected the rest. One by one, they all threw themselves into the practice, causing Shane to barely contain his laughter as the magic spell echoed again and again. As for Lumia and Marika, they were vigorously stopped by Vivian and TL when they planned to practice. Afterward, for the sake of his own life, to not laugh himself to death in this wilderness, Shane reluctantly used magic a few times, making everyone believe their practice was finally paying off, and they contentedly put away their cherished magic tools. As night fell, the grand caravan slowly decreased its speed and stopped above the countryside, preparing for the night's camping. When stars filled the night sky, the escorting caravan had already set up the campsite, and various tents, big and small, dotted the landscape. Fires burned under the moonlight, illuminating the surroundings. A group of knights and adventurers were all busy, some preparing dinner, some patrolling around, and some standing guard in front of the tent with stern and vigilant expressions, as if they were protecting a treasure, not daring to slack at all. But the tent did not contain any treasure or important person. Instead, it confined Killian. At the moment, Killian remained heavily restrained by binding tools, even chained to a pole, his gaze icy, his expression gloomy. Those guys, haven't they come to save me yet? Killian's face was icy, but his heart was filled with uncontrollable rage and humiliation. This period for Killian was like being in hell, constantly in agony. Not because someone was interrogating him, and not because someone was torturing him, but rather for Killian, being imprisoned by the inferior human race like this, being at their mercy, was a fate worse than death. Shame! 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 In Killian's mind, these words incessantly surfaced, deeply stinging his heart. If suicide were an option, Killian would not hesitate, for he felt such profound humiliation.